So what? You file paperwork for the army. My wife's sister grinned at the barbecue. I wiped my hands on Alpha Nu Alpha Kappa Iota Nu. No, I fly. She laughed. Oh yeah? What's your call sign? I said, Iron Widow. My wife's dad, a Navy SEAL, went still. Girl, apologize. Now, he knew exactly who I was. If hell hosted a family reunion, it would look exactly like the Hayes summer barbecue. Plastic chairs that stuck to your thighs, cheap beers sweating in coolers, country music that made you question humanity, and unsolicited career advice from people who think LinkedIn is a dating app. I was standing at the grill, watching a questionable piece of chicken pretend to be edible, when I realized once again why the phrase in-laws sounds like a legal sentence. I'd been married to Harper Hayes for 5 years. She was perfect, smart, kind, and the only Hayes with a functioning sense of humor. But her family? Oh, her family was a sitcom that ran for too many seasons. There was Patricia, the mom who still introduced herself as retired model turned homemaker, even though her modeling career ended when bell bottoms did. Douglas Hayes, Commander Douglas Hayes, the retired Navy SEAL turned barbecue dictator who thought tongs were tactical gear. And then there was Chloe, Harper's sister, the kind of woman who majored in sarcasm and minored in making other people uncomfortable. If confidence were currency, Chloe would have owned a small country, possibly one with bad Wi-Fi and a law against humility. So there I was, flipping burgers like it was a military op, trying to stay under the radar, when she leaned in with that grin, the kind that said, I'm about to ruin your day for sport. So, Ryan, she started, swirling her drink like a Bond villain in flip-flops. You file paperwork for the army, right? The sound of sizzling meat and country twang nearly drowned her out. But trust me, my brain heard every syllable. No, I said, wiping my hands on a napkin. I fly. She snorted. Actually snorted. Oh yeah? What's your call sign, Iron Chef? Her voice was loud enough to get everyone's attention. Even the dog stopped sniffing the cooler. I smiled, that calm, dangerous smile pilots use right before things get interesting. Close, I said. Iron Widow. Her laugh died mid-breath. You could almost hear the record scratch. Commander Hayes froze mid-bite, ribs halfway to his mouth, and for once, the man looked confused. That never happens. Girl, he said in a tone that could freeze lava, apologize. Now, Chloe blinked. Wait, what? Harper looked up from the salad table, frowning. Patricia's face went pale, which was impressive considering her usual shade of cosmetic beige. Dad, Harper asked, glancing between us. The spatula slipped slightly in my hand. I was calm, but my brain was already going full alert. The commander knew. The old man knew. You could see it in his face, that flash of memory, that flicker of recognition. He wasn't looking at me like his daughter's husband anymore. He was looking at Iron Widow, the guy he once thought was a myth. The backyard went dead quiet. Even the mosquitoes called a ceasefire. Everyone's eyes shifted to Douglas Hayes, who now looked like he was seeing a ghost. He set his plate down, jaw tightening. Apologize, he repeated, voice rougher this time. You don't talk to that man like that. Dad, what's going on? Harper asked, clearly trying to process why her father had suddenly turned into Liam Neeson. It's nothing, I said, flipping another burger. Your dad's just remembering something classified. Douglas gave me a look. That mix of gratitude and guilt you only see from someone who's suddenly realizing the quiet guy at the barbecue once saved his life. Patricia stepped forward, clutching her wine glass like a talisman. What's Iron Widow? She asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Douglas's eyes never left mine. That's the pilot who saved our men in '07. Silence. Harper blinked. You mean? Yeah, Douglas said quietly. That was him. Chloe's mouth fell open. You're kidding. I grinned. Nope. Still not funny, though. I flipped another burger with exaggerated calm. Anyone want extra smoke on theirs? Nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of the grill and a far-off country song about trucks and heartbreak that suddenly felt way too ironic. Patricia looked between her husband and me like she was trying to rewrite the last 5 years of family history. You mean to tell me, Ryan, the one who brings potato salad in store containers, is that Iron Widow? Douglas gave a slow nod. That's him. The pilot they said didn't make it out alive. You never told us that, Harper whispered, eyes wide. You never asked, I said lightly, grabbing a beer. And to be fair, Your family was more interested in mocking my choice of apron than my service record. Chloe looked like she wanted to crawl into the grill and self-immolate. I'm so sorry, she mumbled. I didn't know. Don't sweat it, I said, popping the cap off my beer. I prefer low expectations. Makes everything else look heroic. Douglas took a slow sip of his drink, eyes fixed on me like he was remembering every detail. The radio chatter, the sound of the helicopter blades, the desert storm. Iron Widow, he muttered. Damn, you really were that guy. Still am, I said. Just upgraded from sandstorms to suburban drama. The commander actually laughed. For the first time in history, the man laughed. Patricia, however, looked like she'd just realized her entire social circle had been bragging about the wrong son-in-law. You mean my bridge friends have been calling you Ryan the clerk this whole time? You can update them, I said. Maybe Ryan the guy who saved your husband's life will look better on Christmas cards. Harper was still staring at me, processing. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because, I said, flipping the last burger, I didn't marry you for applause. Chloe let out a weak laugh, more from embarrassment than humor. Okay, but Iron Widow? That's kind of badass. It's better than Iron Chef, I said. Though my burgers are pretty deadly. The tension broke. Laughter rippled through the group. Awkward at first, then real. Even Patricia chuckled, though it sounded like her pride was still digesting it. The conversation slowly shifted back to normal topics. Who brought the potato salad? Why the neighbor's kid kept stealing sodas? And whether Douglas's grill was overkill for a backyard cookout. But under all that, something had shifted. The balance. The unspoken hierarchy. The civilian son-in-law who dabbles in planes had just been promoted, permanently. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the fireflies came out, Douglas approached me quietly. He didn't say much, he didn't have to. He just nodded once, that subtle military nod that means respect, gratitude. We're good. Didn't expect you to recognize the call sign, I said. He smirked. Didn't expect Iron Widow to marry my daughter. Yeah, life's funny like that, I said. 1 minute you're flying through hell, the next you're arguing about potato salad. He chuckled, a deep, genuine sound I didn't think he was capable of. You handled it well, he said. Didn't rub it in. Didn't need to, I replied. They'll Google it later. He laughed again. Fair enough. Patricia joined him, looping her arm through his. Ryan, she said, voice soft now. We've misjudged you. It's okay, I said. If it helps, I misjudged your deviled eggs. She gasped, then smiled. Touché. Chloe approached next, holding a plate of brownies like a peace offering. For real, I'm sorry, she said. Guess I'm not as funny as I thought. You're fine, I said. Just remember, next time you tease someone about their job, make sure they're not licensed to bomb small countries. She laughed nervously. Deal. As the night wrapped up, I sat on the porch with Harper, watching Douglas argue with the grill like it had insulted his service record. You're awfully calm for someone who just blew up a family myth, she said. What can I say? I grinned. Classified info makes for great dinner conversation. She nudged me. I can't believe you never told me. You married me for me, not for medals, I said. Besides, your dad and I made a deal years ago. A deal? Yeah, I said, sipping my beer. He keeps my missions quiet. I pretend his grilling doesn't violate the Geneva Convention. She burst out laughing so hard she nearly dropped her drink. And in that moment, with laughter echoing across the yard, I realized something. Sometimes silence isn't about hiding who you are. It's about waiting for the right moment to remind people exactly who they're dealing with. That night, as the stars blinked over a backyard full of smoke and beer cans, I smiled to myself. The Hayes family would never look at me the same way again. And honestly, about damn time. You ever walk into a family gathering and realize you're the designated punchline? That was me, every single Hayes event before the great barbecue revelation. Imagine a roast you never agreed to, starring your in-laws as the headlining comedians and you as the confused guy holding a plate of cold coleslaw. The Hayes clan had a special gift. They could turn anything I said into a punchline and somehow make me thank them for it. Patricia, my mother-in-law, was the ringleader. She had this talent for smiling while she insulted you, like a Southern belle who just told you your shirt was adorably brave. Every time she introduced me to someone new, she'd clap her hands together and chirp, "This is Ryan, our civilian son-in-law who dabbles in planes." Dabbles. like I was finger painting with jet fuel. The woman made it sound like I occasionally glued wings to paper and hoped for lift. And Douglas, the retired SEAL patriarch, he just grunted, not words, just noises. The man could express an entire emotional range with a single He'd sit there with his arms crossed, looking like a cross between a judge and a linebacker, occasionally tossing in helpful commentary like, "Real pilots don't wear oven mitts when they grill, son." Then there was Chloe, my favorite. Harper's sister, a woman who made sarcasm her religion and gossip her cardio. She'd roll her eyes, toss her blonde hair, and hit me with something like, "Oh look, Ryan brought his little flight cap. So cute. You gonna fly the grill next?" Every single time, the family would burst out laughing like it was primetime comedy hour, and I'd just smile, sip my drink, and silently remind myself that jail time wasn't worth it. They thought I was soft. They thought because I didn't brag about medals or bark orders, I must have been some paper-pushing clerk who flinched at turbulence. What they didn't know was that half the things I'd done were still stamped classified, and the other half were too insane to explain to people who still thought Bluetooth was witchcraft. But I let it slide, because in marriage, I'd learned something important. Silence beats handcuffs. You can't get arrested for thinking sarcastic thoughts, no matter how vivid they are. Every holiday, every dinner, every small family get-together, I'd put on the calm husband act. The yes, ma'am, no, sir, please pass the casserole persona. Meanwhile, I'd sit there mentally calculating wind speed and trajectory, wondering if it was physically possible to eject from a dining table conversation without breaking a window. One Thanksgiving, Patricia decided to hold a gratitude circle. You know, that thing where everyone shares what they're thankful for while pretending not to judge each other's answers. Harper said she was thankful for family. Douglas said he was thankful for discipline. Chloe said she was thankful for Botox. Then Patricia turned to me, eyes gleaming with the kind of mischief only Chardonnay could fuel, and said, "And you, Ryan? What are you thankful for? Office supplies?" I smiled. "Actually, Patricia, I'm thankful for flight clearance and fuel efficiency." She blinked, confused. "Oh," she said, chuckling. "You mean, like, your little job?" "No," I said, still smiling. "Like the kind that saved 12 people's lives in Kandahar." The silence was beautiful, brief, but beautiful. Then Douglas coughed, muttered something about kids these days exaggerating, and the moment was gone. Harper squeezed my hand under the table, giving me the look, the universal married look that says please don't start a family war before dessert. So I didn't. I let it go. Again, every time they poked at me, I'd think back to the things I'd seen. Tracer rounds cutting through darkness, the way the radio goes quiet when a friend doesn't make it back, the kind of silence that makes you appreciate every dumb joke you'll ever hear again. So yeah, I could handle a few snide comments about my desk job. They were amateurs. I'd survived worse than family dinners with cheap wine and overcooked turkey. But the funny thing about people like the Hayes, they love to underestimate you. They build this version of you in their heads, simple, predictable, safe, and then they act shocked when you don't fit the script. Douglas would watch me mow the lawn and mutter, "Bet he logs that in his flight hours." Chloe once asked if I wore my pilot gloves while washing dishes. Patricia once gave me a gift, a framed quote that said behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes. Cute. I hung it up in the garage, right next to my flight helmet. They didn't get it. They didn't understand that humility wasn't weakness, it was strategy. See, I'd spent years flying missions where bragging got people killed, where silence wasn't about pride, it was about survival. So yeah, I could survive family brunch. I treated their insults like turbulence, unpleasant but temporary. Harper used to whisper, "You're so patient." I'd grin and say, "Nah, just trained for long flights." And she'd laugh, because she didn't know how literal that was. The truth was, I didn't need them to respect me. I just needed them to keep their noise below jet engine level until dessert. The worst was the Christmas party. Douglas had decided to host a military-themed dinner, because apparently, nothing says holiday spirit like camo tablecloths and flag napkins. He wore his old uniform jacket, chest puffed like a peacock, while I sat there in a sweater Harper picked out, trying not to laugh at the irony. At one point, he leaned back and said, "You know, Ryan, you remind me of my old radio guy. Good with buttons, bad under pressure." I took a sip of my drink, smiled, and said, "Funny, You remind me of my old co-pilot, loud and always slightly lost. Harper choked on her wine. Chloe spat out a laugh. Douglas froze, and for one brief moment, I thought I might have just earned his respect, or a headlock. But he grinned, nodded slowly, and said, "You've got bite, son. I like that." I smiled back. "Careful, Commander. I bite harder than I look." Patricia gasped. Chloe laughed so hard she had to excuse herself. And for a second, just 1 second, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd crack through the fortress of Hayes' arrogance. Then Patricia refilled her glass and said, "Oh, men and their jokes. Anyway, Ryan, how's your little flying hobby?" And boom, back to square one. The following months were rinse and repeat. More dinners, more mockery, more chances for me to fantasize about moving to another state. But through it all, Harper stayed loyal, always defending me, always reminding them that I was more than they gave me credit for. She'd say things like, "Ryan's flown more miles than you've driven, Dad," or "He's just modest, Mom." And every time, they'd nod like she'd said something adorable, then go right back to treating me like the family's emotional support husband. Still, I kept showing up. Because love makes you do stupid things, like attending brunches with people who think Top Gun is a documentary. But here's the thing. When you're surrounded by ignorance long enough, you learn to weaponize it. You turn it into armor. Their underestimation became my favorite invisibility cloak. I could observe, plan, and quietly enjoy knowing I had stories they'd never believe. Stories they wouldn't even be cleared to hear. And I knew, deep down, that someday, the truth would surface. That one day, the universe would hand me a microphone, or in my case, a spatula, and say, "Your turn." Until then, I kept flipping metaphorical burgers, smiling through the jokes, and thinking to myself, ignorance is loud, but it burns out fast. And when that summer barbecue rolled around, the one where Chloe cracked her Iron Chef joke, oh, I was ready. I didn't plan the reveal, but when it happened, when the laughter died and Douglas Hayes himself went pale, it felt like poetic justice. Every snide comment, every jab, every little pilot nickname, all of it turned to ash the second he realized who I really was. The same man they dismissed had once flown through hell to save Douglas's squad. The same civilian son-in-law had kept their family's patriarch alive long enough to have these barbecues in the first place. Karma, as it turns out, loves irony. Looking back, those years of ignorance were the setup. Every joke, every condescending smile, it made that one moment of silence hit harder. Because respect isn't earned by bragging. It's earned by surviving, by standing there calm and steady while people reveal who they are. So yeah, before that day, every Hayes gathering felt like a roast I never signed up for. But after that day, let's just say they started Googling Iron Widow real fast. And somewhere between Patricia's shocked silence and Douglas's sudden salute, I realized, sometimes the best revenge is just letting the truth land on its own runway. You ever notice how a backyard barbecue smells like peace until you realize you're surrounded by people who think mayonnaise is a spice and gossip is a sport? That was me, apron on, spatula in hand, pretending the smell of lighter fluid and hypocrisy didn't clash. From the outside, it looked like a normal Saturday. Paper plates, plastic cups, kids chasing each other with water balloons, someone's uncle complaining about gas prices like he personally controlled OPEC. But inside my head, the sound of laughter and clinking bottles kept dissolving into rotor blades and radio static. It's weird how trauma sneaks up on you. 1 second you're flipping burgers, the next your brain's replaying a desert storm like a movie you didn't buy tickets for. I remember looking at the smoke curling up from the grill, and all I could think was, I've seen that color before, over Kandahar, over broken metal, over a horizon that never forgave me. Most people think flying is glamorous. They imagine Top Gun high fives, sunset shots, and aviator shades that make you irresistible. Reality check. Most of the time, you're sweating in a cockpit that smells like fuel and fear, praying the radar isn't lying. My call sign, Iron Widow, wasn't some macho nickname I picked because it sounded cool. It was given to me after my third emergency landing, the one where the co-pilot didn't make it back. There's a twisted rule in our squadron. You earn a call sign by surviving something no one else should have. Iron Widow stuck because every time the odds went bad, I walked away, and someone didn't. Not exactly a party story, So yeah, I kept that one to myself. So while the Hayes family was debating whether sweet corn or coleslaw counted as a vegetable, I was standing over the grill, surrounded by people who thought classified meant boring. I could hear Chloe laughing behind me, already working the crowd like she was running open mic night. Ryan takes his grilling seriously, she said. He probably writes a flight plan for his burgers. Everyone laughed. Huh, original. I just smiled, flipped a patty, and muttered under my breath, at least my burgers don't crash. Douglas, the commander himself, was on his second beer, holding court about the good old days, SEAL missions, covert ops, near-death experiences that conveniently never had witnesses. Every sentence started with, back when men were men, which roughly translated to, please clap. I didn't mind. I'd learned early that old soldiers need to tell stories so they can live with the ones they can't. But then he said it, the thing that always poked my patience. Flying, he told a wide-eyed cousin, is logistics. The real work's on the ground. I nearly choked on my own smirk. Logistics? Buddy, I once flew through a sandstorm so thick it looked like Mars was trying to kill us. I've dodged RPGs, navigated blind, and landed on a runway that barely existed, all while listening to screaming through a headset. Logistics my ass. But I didn't say that. I just brushed some barbecue sauce on a drumstick like I was painting calmness onto chaos. The truth, and oh, it was a juicy one, was that Douglas's legendary SEAL team wouldn't have made it home in 2007 if it weren't for Iron Widow. Yep, that was me. Same guy now in an apron with Kiss the Cook, printed in red letters like a cosmic joke. His team was pinned down in an op that went sideways fast. Wrong coordinates, sandstorm inbound, radio blackout. Command told me to abort. I didn't. Because when you hear men screaming coordinates through static, you don't check your manual. You check your pulse and push forward. I still remember the sound of the engine straining, the storm turning daylight into blood orange, visibility down to nothing, and that gut feeling that said, if you mess this up, they're done. I dropped elevation, went under the radar, literally, and pulled those guys out piece by piece. 12 of them, Douglas included. He was younger then, meaner, but alive because of a very reckless pilot who didn't listen to orders. He never talked about it, probably because it's hard to make jokes about the guy who once had your life in his hands. I don't blame him. Pride's a funny thing. It burns slow, like jet fuel. Some men spend years pretending their near death didn't happen because it reminds them they weren't in control. And Douglas? Control was his religion. So he kept it quiet, let the myth fade. And meanwhile, I built a new life. Quieter, calmer, more human. I swapped cockpits for cul-de-sacs, combat for cookouts, and I told myself that silence was strength. Until that damn barbecue. The smell of charcoal kept messing with me. Smoke does that to veterans. You don't just see it, you feel it. It crawls up your spine, whispers memories you thought you'd buried. I stared at the flame, saw the same shimmer of heat that used to rise off the tarmac after a landing. My hand tightened on the spatula. Ridiculous, right? But it wasn't a spatula anymore. It was a flight stick, slick with sweat. I blinked hard, shook it off, and turned the meat. Nobody noticed, which was good. The last thing I needed was Chloe thinking PTSD stood for, please tell stories. Then came the moment. Chloe, with her half-buzzed confidence, sauntered up, drink in hand, and threw her now infamous grenade. So, Ryan, you file paperwork for the Army, right? It hit harder than she knew, because it wasn't just ignorance. It was the echo of every civilian who never gets it, every assumption that war is just buttons and bravado. I could have ignored it. Hell, I almost did. But then I saw Douglas, beer halfway to his mouth, freeze. He knew that call sign when I dropped it. Iron Widow. It was instinct. I didn't plan to reveal it, but something in me wanted that silence, that pause where truth punches pride in the face. And when it hit him, the way his jaw locked and eyes went distant, I knew exactly where his mind went. Not to the backyard, but back to the desert, to that storm, that voice on the radio saying, hold tight. I'm coming. The shift was immediate. You could feel it. The laughter evaporated. The air thickened. The burgers kept sizzling, but the world went still. Douglas wasn't looking at his son-in-law anymore. He was looking at a ghost from a chapter he thought was closed. And for the first time, I realized something. I hadn't just saved his life. I'd been haunting it ever since. That night, after everyone went home, Harper and I sat in the dark kitchen. She was quiet, stirring her tea the way people do when they're trying not to ask something heavy. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she finally said. I took a breath. "Because I didn't marry you to be Iron Widow. I married you to be Ryan." She nodded, but her eyes glistened like she was re-meeting me. "You saved my dad." "I saved 12 men," I corrected. "Your dad just happened to be one of them." She smiled through her tears. "He's never going to live this down." "Good," I said. "He still owes me a drink." But even after that, my brain kept replaying the past. You can't just flip a switch on adrenaline and memory. Some nights, I still hear the beeping of instruments, the mechanical heartbeat of a machine that trusted me more than I trusted myself. Flying was never just about skill. It was about nerve, about knowing the sky might kill you and going up anyway. That's what people like Chloe would never understand. You don't come home from that and brag. You come home and build IKEA furniture in silence because you're just happy to have walls around you. Funny thing, after the barbecue, Douglas started treating me differently. Not outright sentimental, but the kind of respect you can feel without words. He'd give me the nod, the unspoken "I see you." We didn't talk about the mission. We didn't have to. Soldiers don't need words when silence already says enough. But I could tell he was thinking about it, about that day, about the man behind the spatula. Maybe he finally understood that sometimes the quiet ones are only quiet because they've already heard too much noise. If I'm being honest, I didn't feel heroic. I never do. Heroism is messy. It's blood, sweat, and fear disguised as duty. It's watching the sun rise over a place you'd give anything to forget. It's shaking hands with ghosts every time you close your eyes. That's why I never told the Hazes, because they wouldn't understand the cost behind the medal. And if they did, they'd stop laughing, and I'd lose the one thing I liked about that family, their ability to turn everything into a joke, even if I was the punchline. So yeah, I let them mock. I let them tease. Because deep down, I knew someday the truth would come out, and when it did, it wouldn't just rewrite my image, it'd rewire theirs. I didn't want to humiliate them. Well, maybe Chloe a little, but I did want them to see that not every hero wears camouflage to the dinner table. Some of us wear aprons and keep the fire steady. That barbecue, the one they thought was just another summer hangout, became the battlefield where truth finally landed. I didn't need applause. I didn't need medals. I just needed that one moment when the world stopped laughing long enough to listen. And it came, wrapped in smoke, silence, and the stunned face of a man who finally realized his daughter married the pilot who once saved him from disappearing into desert dust. After that day, I looked at the grill differently. It wasn't just a tool for burgers. It was a symbol of control, of patience, of heat managed instead of chaos endured. Operation Barbecue wasn't planned, but damn, it was successful. Mission accomplished, and not a single casualty, except maybe Chloe's ego. If awkward silence had a flavor, that backyard was marinated in it. You could taste the tension between the ribs and the regret. After Chloe's paperwork jab and my not-so-subtle drop of Iron Widow, the Hayes family cookout went from rowdy sitcom to courtroom drama in 10 seconds flat. Even the mosquitoes took the night off. Douglas Hayes, the man who once claimed he could stare down a grizzly, looked like someone had just unplugged his ego. The commander was frozen mid-bite, holding his rib like it might testify against him. Chloe was still half smiling, half terrified, trying to figure out why her dad looked like he'd seen a ghost with flight clearance. And Patricia, dear Patricia, was clutching her wine like a lifeline, her Botoxed forehead furrowing for the first time in history. I'd seen combat zones calmer than that backyard. Harper, bless her peacekeeping heart, leaned in close to me and whispered, "Ryan, what's going on?" Her voice had that careful edge of a woman trying not to panic in front of family. I grinned, not a forced grin, but that cocky, pilot-level calm that always gets me in trouble. "Oh," I said, flipping a burger with one hand. "Your dad just remembered something classified." Douglas's eyes darted to me, narrowing like he wanted to disagree but couldn't. The man's brain was rebooting in real time. Patricia blinked at both of us, confusion painted all over her face. "What's Iron Widow?" she asked, like it was a brand of perfume. Douglas took a slow breath, the kind you only take when you're about to drop a truth bomb nobody saw coming. "That's the pilot," he said, voice low, "who saved our men in '07. You could have heard a toothpick drop." Harper turned to me. eyes wide. You mean? She started, but Douglas cut her off. Yeah, he said, still staring at me. That was him. Now, I don't know what part one enjoyed more. Chloe's face turning ghost white or Patricia gasping like someone had just told her carbs were back on the banned list. Chloe stammered. You're kidding, right? I smiled, casually flipping another burger. Nope. Still not funny, though. The spatula sizzled, and for once, the silence felt earned. Douglas looked at me with this weird mix of shock, respect, and maybe a little shame. The kind of look you give someone you've spent years underestimating. Patricia set her drink down, trembling just enough to make the ice clink. Wait, you mean to tell me? Orion, the one who helps with the recycling. Was that Iron Widow? She asked, her voice cracking on that. Douglas nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. That's him. The pilot command said was MIA for 2 days. The one who flew through the storm. He swallowed. The one who didn't listen to orders. Chloe looked like she wanted to melt into the grass. Wow, she muttered. I didn't know. Don't worry, I said. Classified tends to mean that. I took a sip of my beer. Now, who wants extra smoke on theirs? No one laughed. Even the dog stopped panting. It was glorious. Patricia finally found her voice. Why didn't you say anything? She demanded. All these years, we've been judging me. I offered. She blinked, caught. Well, yes, but why didn't you correct us? I shrugged. Didn't seem worth it. I figured if I told you, you'd just start asking me to give motivational speeches at brunch. That got a nervous laugh from Harper, but everyone else was still too stunned to function. Douglas finally spoke again, quieter this time. You broke 2 ribs landing that bird, didn't you? He asked. His tone wasn't that of a father-in-law. It was a soldier talking to another. I met his eyes. Yeah, I said. Could have been worse. I still had all 12 of your guys breathing when I hit the tarmac. He nodded once, tight-lipped, eyes glassy. I never forgot that voice over the comms, he said. Didn't think I'd ever meet it again, let alone at my daughter's wedding years later. Small world, I said. And you still managed to make it smaller at every barbecue. For the first time ever, Douglas cracked a smile. Small, controlled, but real. You always were cocky, he said. You always were loud. I shot back. That broke the ice. Harper exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a decade. Patricia blinked back tears she swore were just from the smoke. Chloe shuffled awkwardly, clutching a plate she clearly didn't need anymore. So, Patricia said finally, her voice regaining its usual high pitch. Our son-in-law's a war hero, and we've been calling him Paper Boy. She turned to Douglas, smacking his shoulder. You let me embarrass us for 5 years. You were doing fine without me, Douglas muttered. I almost lost it right there. Chloe cleared her throat. So, when you said you fly, you meant real planes? Yep, I said. Big, noisy ones. Not the kind that drop off Amazon packages. She winced. I'm sorry, Ryan. I was ignorant. I suggested. Yeah, she sighed. That. Don't worry, I said. Ignorance is curable. Just takes a little altitude. Even Douglas chuckled at that. As the tension started to fade, the air filled with a different kind of silence. One that wasn't about shock, but respect. Patricia started gathering plates, mumbling something about rethinking the seating chart for next Thanksgiving. Harper slipped her arm around my waist. You could have told me, she whispered. You married me, not my call sign, I said. Besides, I liked being your boring husband. Easier that way. She smiled up at me. I don't think boring is the word I'd use. Heroic then? Sarcastic, she said. Still heroic, I replied. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood by the dying grill, the smoke curling lazily into the dark. Douglas walked over, carrying 2 beers. He handed me one. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gone in? He asked. Every day, I said. But not for long. Regret's a waste of fuel. He nodded, thoughtful. You know, he said, when I found out Harper was marrying a pilot, I thought, here we go, I groaned. No, he said, chuckling. I thought she was marrying a guy who'd bail when things got tough. Turns out, she married the only man I know who doesn't know how to quit. You just realized that? I asked. Better late than never, he said. Besides, humility isn't my strong suit. No kidding, I said, raising my beer. To humility, then, yours on backorder. He clinked his bottle against mine and actually laughed. You're a pain in the ass, Blake, he said. You're not wrong, Commander. We stood there in the quiet backyard. Two men who'd both seen too much, pretending we were just talking about grilling techniques. The smoke drifted between us like a ghost of the past, curling and fading into nothing. You know, Douglas said after a while, Patricia's gonna start telling everyone our son-in-law's a national treasure. That'll make Christmas fun, I said. Guess I'll have to start charging for autographs. You've got jokes now, huh? He said. Always did, I replied. You were just too busy grunting to notice. He laughed again, this time louder, freer. And for the first time since I'd joined that family, I realized something important. Douglas Hayes didn't hate me. He just didn't know me. The man respected battle scars, not wedding rings. And now that he finally knew both, I wasn't the enemy anymore. When I went back inside, Harper was cleaning up. Chloe was helping, trying to earn redemption through dish soap. Need a hand? I asked. Chloe looked up sheepishly. I think I owe you more than that, she said. You saved my dad. I shrugged. I saved a team. He just happened to be the loudest one on it. Still, she said, I'm sorry. For all the jokes. You weren't wrong, I said. I do file paperwork sometimes. She tilted her head. Missiles count as paperwork. They do when you sign them. That earned the first genuine laugh I'd ever heard from her. You're scary, Ryan. You're just realizing that. By the time everyone left, the air had softened. The backyard, once full of noise and laughter and judgment, was now just quiet, peaceful, even. The kind of peace you get after a long, overdue truth finally lands. I sat on the porch steps, watching the smoke drift away, and thought about how fast life can shift. One moment you're the family joke, the next you're the guy who flew through hell and came back with extra burgers. Harper came out, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. You okay? She asked. Always, I said. You sure? Yeah. Just thinking how smoke always clears, eventually. She leaned her head on my shoulder. They'll never tease you again, you know. I smiled. Oh, they will. Just with more respect. As the last ember died in the grill, I realized the truth. Sometimes silence isn't strength, it's survival. You keep quiet not because you're weak, but because you know one day, the truth will roar louder than any defense you could ever make. Tonight, it did. And the best part? I didn't even have to raise my voice. The Hayes barbecue would never be the same again. Smoke, silence, and a side of reality, all served fresh off the grill. If you've never had someone apologize to you while holding a tray of muffins like it's a peace treaty, you haven't truly lived. The morning after the great barbecue revelation, I woke up to the smell of burnt coffee and the faint sound of guilt knocking on my front door. I shuffled downstairs in my old Flight Academy t-shirt, the one Harper always steals when she's cold, even though we both know it's emotional theft, and opened the door to find Chloe Hayes, my sister-in-law, standing there like a sinner at confession. She held a basket of muffins so big it looked like she was bribing a small army. You're really a combat pilot? She asked before I could even say good morning. Her tone was somewhere between awe, regret, and mild panic, like she'd just realized the guy she used to mock might also know how to call in an airstrike. I leaned against the doorframe, sipping my coffee like a man who finally had the upper hand. Yep, real planes. No paper clips. She blinked, nodding way too fast. And you saved Dad's team? Just doing my job, I said. I didn't need to flex. The silence was doing it for me. Wow, she whispered. I thought you were like admin support or something. I am, I said, keeping a straight face. I just file paperwork with missiles. She nearly choked on her own guilt. That's when Douglas walked in through the side door, because, apparently, retired SEALs don't believe in knocking. He had that smug grin that only veterans get after being proven wrong. He's being modest, he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder hard enough to rearrange my spine. He flew under radar, saved 12 men, and broke 2 ribs landing. The man's a damn machine. I shot him a look. So you do remember. He grinned. Hard to forget the guy who dragged my sorry ass out of a desert. Patricia appeared behind him, robe tied tight, eyes wide as she processed the conversation like it was a daytime drama. Douglas Hayes, you mean to tell me you never told us that? She demanded. Didn't want to make Thanksgiving awkward, he said with a shrug. Too late for that, I muttered. Harper came downstairs then, hair messy, face still soft from sleep. What's going on? She mumbled. Apology tour, I said, pointing at Chloe's muffin basket. Stage 1, carbohydrates. Chloe groaned. Oh my God, will you ever let this go? Nope, I said cheerfully. I waited 5 years for this. Patricia stepped forward, ever the dramatic matriarch. Ryan, I owe you an apology too, she said, hands clasped like she was addressing the Pope. We may have underestimated you. May have? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You called me civilian support staff in front of your bridge club. She gasped. You heard that? Oh yeah, I said, sipping my coffee. I was in the kitchen. Great acoustics in your house. Douglas chuckled, clearly enjoying the rare moment of watching his family squirm. Told you not to underestimate quiet men, he said. They're usually the ones with stories. Patricia gave him a glare sharp enough to cut steak. You're enjoying this. Damn right I am, he said. You all teased this man for years, and he never said a word. That's discipline. Or patience, Harper said, wrapping her arm around me. Or fear of being disowned, I added. Everyone laughed, awkwardly, but it was progress. We all sat down in the living room like it was a post-mission debrief. Chloe pushed the muffin basket toward me. Pick one, she said. They're apology-flavored. I picked a blueberry one, tore it in half, and nodded. Tastes like regret. Nice touch. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Okay, fine, I deserve that. You deserved worse, I said. But I'm a forgiving man. Patricia sighed. So what now? Are we supposed to salute you at dinner? No, I said. Just maybe stop introducing me like I fly drones for DoorDash. Harper sat back, smirking. You realize they're all going to overcompensate now, right? She whispered to me. Yeah, I said. I give it a week before someone knits me a flag. Douglas leaned forward. You know, son, I should have told them. But I figured it was your story to tell. You figured wrong, I said. It's a hell of a lot funnier this way. The next few days were weird, like living in an alternate universe where I suddenly mattered at family functions. Patricia called me captain for the first time, like we were on a cruise. Harper's uncle started texting me random military memes. Even Chloe texted me, do you still have your flight suit? Which, coming from her, was progress. Douglas invited me over for men's night, which apparently meant beer, cigars, and him pretending not to ask questions about classified missions. So, he said one evening, exhaling smoke like a wise old cliché, what's it like up there? I smirked. Quiet. Peaceful. No family drama. He laughed so hard he nearly choked. You're all right, kid, he said, handing me another beer. Didn't think you had that edge in you. You weren't looking, I said. You were too busy guarding the grill. Patricia, on the other hand, began her own redemption campaign. Suddenly, she was inviting me to lunch, asking about my career milestones, and baking desserts that didn't taste like resentment. One afternoon, she even said, you know, Ryan, I think we misjudged you. I grinned. You think? All right, she said, we did misjudge you. Don't worry, I said. I like low expectations. Makes it easier to impress people. You're insufferable, she said, smiling despite herself. And yet, I replied, you keep baking for me. Chloe's transformation was the funniest part. She went from eye-rolling skeptic to my accidental hype woman. At family dinners, she'd tell everyone. You know Ryan flew rescue missions, right? Like she was my PR rep. Once, at a coffee shop, I heard her bragging to a friend, my brother-in-law's a legend. I nearly spit out my latte. When she caught me, she turned red. Don't get smug, she said. I still think you're a dork. You think a lot of things, I said. Most of them wrong. But here's the thing. Beneath all the teasing and late apologies, something shifted. Douglas started calling me son, without irony. Patricia stopped looking at me like I was a questionable life choice. And Chloe? She stopped joking and started listening. Turns out, they weren't malicious. Just blind. People like them live in small worlds, safe, suburban bubbles where war is something that happens on TV between commercial breaks. They didn't know what it meant to live with ghosts or gratitude. And now they did. A week later, Douglas dropped by again. He had that look, the same one he had back in the desert, when he realized the mission might actually succeed. You know, he said, I've spent years being the hero in my stories. Feels good to know someone else gets the credit for once. Don't worry, Commander, I said. You can still have the dramatic monologues. He laughed. Deal. Then he handed me a small, worn patch, his old unit insignia. Keep it, he said. Consider it an overdue thank you. I turned it over in my hands. The stitching frayed, the colors faded. You sure? I asked. Yeah, he said. It's been collecting dust. Looks better on a man who's still earning his stripes. When he left, Harper found me staring at it. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. Just realizing this is the weirdest apology I've ever gotten. She smiled. At least it's sincere. Yeah, I said. But muffins were easier to digest. The following weekend, we all had dinner together. No tension, no jokes, no backhanded compliments. Just laughter. Chloe even asked me to say grace. I smirked. You sure you want the guy with missiles to bless the food? Douglas chuckled. Go on, Captain. So I did. Lord, thank you for family, forgiveness, and the fact that Chloe didn't burn the rolls this time. Everyone laughed, even Patricia. It felt normal. Finally, that night, as we said goodbye, Chloe hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the stiff, I guess we're related kind. You're a good man, Ryan, she said. Don't let it go to your head. Too late, I said. Already there. She laughed and walked away shaking her head. Harper leaned into me, whispering, You love this, don't you? Absolutely, I said. I waited years for this redemption arc. And as I closed the door that night, I couldn't help but think, respect doesn't always land on schedule. Sometimes it circles the runway for years before finally touching down. But when it does, it's worth every second of turbulence. You know how they say good things take time? Yeah, well, respect in the Hayes family took so long to land it probably needed air traffic control clearance. One day I was Harper's husband who plays pilot, and the next, I was Captain Ryan Blake, Iron Widow, savior of the SEALs. The switch was so dramatic I half expected a theme song to play every time I walked into their house. The same people who used to ignore me at family dinners were suddenly pulling chairs for me, asking about missions they didn't have clearance to even Google. It was surreal. Harper's cousins, those loud 20-somethings who once debated whether I really flew planes or just helped out at the airport, were now begging for selfies like I was a celebrity. Can you do the pilot pose? One of them asked. You know, like in Top Gun? Sure, I said. If you can do the taxpayer pose, you paid for my fuel. They laughed, but I wasn't kidding. I'd been invisible to this family for years. Now I was the golden ticket to their patriotic fantasies. Harper just sat there watching me with that smirk she does when she knows I'm both amused and mildly disgusted. Even Patricia, the queen of passive aggression, started acting like she was my campaign manager. One afternoon she dropped off a pie. Yes, an actual homemade pie. And it didn't taste like regret or judgment for once. I thought you might enjoy something sweet, she said, smiling like she hadn't spent 5 years pretending I was furniture. What's the occasion? I asked. No occasion, she said quickly, then hesitated. Just appreciation. I took a bite. Not poisoned. She gasped. Ryan, hey, just checking, I said, grinning. Old habits. She rolled her eyes but smiled. For Patricia, that was basically a declaration of love. Then there was Douglas. The man had done a full 180. He went from treating me like a civilian intern to introducing me to strangers as the finest damn pilot I ever knew. You want whiplash? Try hearing your father-in-law brag about you after years of mockery. One day, he even asked me to come over early before a family dinner. Need a hand with the grill? I asked. No, he said. Need advice. I nearly dropped my coffee. Advice? Yeah, he said. Nora's thinking about joining the Air Force. I figured you'd know what to tell her. Nora, his niece. The same one who once asked me if flying made your ears pop. Wow, I said. You trust me with career advice now? He grunted. I trust you more than the recruiter. That's fair, I said. Recruiters have better marketing. We sat in his garage, Douglas's sacred man cave filled with medals, half-finished projects, and the unmistakable smell of WD-40 and pride. You know, he said, polishing a wrench like it was symbolic. I didn't respect you at first. Thought you were soft. You weren't wrong, I said. I moisturize. He laughed, shaking his head. Nah, I just didn't get it. You didn't brag. You didn't bark. I thought that meant you didn't have backbone. But you were just steady. Quiet steady. That's one way to say boring, I replied. No, he said, meeting my eyes. That's one way to say reliable. Coming from Douglas Hayes, that was basically a night ship. Later that night, we sat around the dinner table. No tension, no mockery, just laughter and stories. Patricia even poured me the good wine. Chloe was scrolling through her phone, and suddenly she said, Oh my God, Ryan, Did you know there's a Reddit thread about you? Please tell me you're kidding, I said. Nope, she said, grinning. Some old seal wrote a post about the Iron Widow extraction pilot. It's gone viral. You're like a legend now. Douglas puffed up like a proud dad. Damn right he is. I covered my face. Fantastic. I'm internet famous. My life's complete. Harper laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Oh, come on, hero. Enjoy it. Nah, I said. The last time I went viral, it was food poisoning. But beneath all the jokes, something had changed for real. For the first time, I wasn't a background extra in my own marriage's family saga. I was part of the story, respected, appreciated, even admired. It was strange, though, because the thing I'd spent years not talking about was suddenly all they wanted to talk about. Every visit turned into an impromptu Q&A session. So, did you ever fly over enemy lines? What's the scariest thing that happened? Did you really break ribs and keep flying? Can you teach me how to land a plane? Yeah, sure. In about 10 years, I'd say, grinning. I didn't mind the questions. Okay, I minded some. But I could tell they were finally seeing me as more than Harper's husband. I'd gone from background noise to main character. Harper noticed too. One night, while we were driving home from another family dinner that didn't end in passive-aggressive chaos, she reached over and rested her hand on mine. You seem lighter, she said. Lighter? Yeah, she smiled. Like the weight's off. You're finally being seen. I chuckled. Took them 5 years and one classified confession, but yeah. You earned it, she said softly. You didn't need to prove anything, but I'm glad they finally get it. I'm glad too, I said. Now maybe they'll stop asking me to bring paper plates. A few days later, I got a call from Douglas. You free tonight? He asked. Depends, I said. Are we grilling or having a heart-to-heart? Both, he said. Bring beer. I showed up to find him sitting on the porch, looking out at the sunset with that haunted butt content look old soldiers get. You ever miss it? He asked. Flying, I said. Every day, but I like sleeping without sand in my teeth. He nodded. You know, I used to think retirement was peace. Turns out it's just quieter noise. Yeah, I said. Peace is overrated. Boring as hell. He laughed. You're a strange man, Blake. You raised a strange daughter, I said. He clinked his bottle against mine. Fair. The weirdest part about respect arriving late is that it doesn't come quietly. It's loud. Obvious. Overcompensating. Patricia started introducing me to strangers as our son-in-law, the pilot hero. Chloe bought me a mug that said, warning, may drop truth bombs. Even Nora gave me a hand-drawn card that said, you're cool, Uncle Iron Widow. I kept it on the fridge, partly because it was sweet, partly because it would annoy Patricia that her art piece got replaced by a crayon jet. Eventually, even Douglas started opening up more. One night, he confessed, you know, when I realized it was you who saved us. I felt ashamed. Why? I asked. Because, he said quietly, I'd been mocking the man who once saved my life. That's not something you come back from easy. You just did, I said. Took a few burgers, but I forgive you. He chuckled. Guess I owe you more than beer. Yeah, I said, but I'll take beer anyway. Harper loved seeing it, her dad and me finally getting along. One evening, she caught us watching an old war movie together. You two bonding over explosions? She teased. No, Douglas said. Just comparing accuracy. They got the flight physics all wrong. I smirked. Yeah, and the dialogue's too coherent. She rolled her eyes. You're both impossible. That's called chemistry, I said. Stockholm Syndrome, she countered. But if I'm being honest, respect came with its own kind of pressure. Suddenly, everyone looked at me differently. Like I was this flawless example of courage. Like I hadn't had nights where my hands shook, or days where I questioned everything. They wanted the myth, not the man. So I played along, told them the funny versions of stories, skipped the dark parts. It was easier that way. Let them keep their hero. The truth, that I was just a man who did his job and got lucky, didn't fit as nicely into family dinners. Still, there was something healing about it. The jokes stopped being cruel and started being affectionate. Chloe once teased, Hey, Iron Widow, need help parallel parking? And I said, yeah, because my F-22 didn't come with backup cameras. Everyone laughed. Even I did. It was the kind of laughter that comes from comfort, not condescension. For once, I belonged, not because of medals or missions, but because they finally saw me. A month later, Douglas pulled me aside after dinner. You know, he said, I should have said something years ago. About what? I asked. About what you did. About who you are. I should have told them sooner. I smiled. Relax. If I wanted glory, I'd have gone into politics. He laughed. Still, I'm proud. You earn more than jokes. I raised my beer. And yet, the jokes were character building. He nodded. You handled it better than I would have. That's because I'm better looking, I said. He burst out laughing, almost spilling his drink. When we left that night, Harper looked at me and said, You know, it took them a while, but they got there. I smiled, watching Douglas wave from the porch. Yeah, I said. Respect lands late, but at least it lands. And as we drove home, windows down, radio low, I thought about how far we'd come, from mockery to mutual admiration. The mission wasn't just survival anymore. It was acceptance. And for the first time in years, it felt like the sky had finally cleared. When Harper announced she was hosting another family barbecue, I swear I heard thunder, and not the natural kind. It was the sound of my PTSD waking up and saying, Oh, we're doing that again. The last cookout had turned into a classified history lesson, a live-action redemption arc, and a whole lot of emotional smoke. But this time, it felt different. Douglas had been treating me like an equal ever since the big reveal. Patricia was pretending she'd always liked me, and Chloe was, well, trying. Which was impressive considering trying was a foreign language to her. I told Harper, You know this means your dad's gonna hand me the tongs like it's a passing of command, right? She smirked. Good. You've earned it, Captain. I leaned in. Yeah, but if he salutes me again, I'm charging him rent. The day of the barbecue was unusually calm. Blue skies, light breeze, no underlying family judgment wafting through the air. I set up the grill while Douglas hovered nearby like a mission supervisor, arms crossed, inspecting every move. You're using charcoal? He asked. Of course, I said. You want flavor or speed? Flavor, he admitted. Good answer, Captain, I said, smirking. Permission to proceed? He rolled his eyes but cracked a grin. Permission granted. It was our new thing, mock military banter, half serious, half sarcastic. Patricia walked out carrying a tray of deviled eggs like they were medals of honor. I made extra this time, she said, smiling proudly. So no one complains. We've all grown so much, I said. Last time, I thought you were going to report me to HR for my apron. She gave me a playful swat with a napkin. Progress. Then there was Chloe. She arrived late, as usual, but for once, she didn't start with a joke. Need help with the burgers? She asked, hovering awkwardly near the grill. No, I said. This is a military operation. Stay in civilian territory. Copy that, she said, mock saluting. At ease, Private Muffin Basket. Oh my God, she groaned, laughing. You're never going to drop that nickname, are you? Never, I said. It's a permanent rank. Even little Nora, Chloe's daughter, was running around the yard wearing aviator sunglasses 2 sizes too big, shouting, Uncle Ryan is Iron Man. I bent down and whispered, Close enough, kiddo. Just fewer lawsuits. Harper floated between everyone like the calm and the chaos, refilling drinks, managing small talk, keeping the peace, as usual. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She asked, catching me smirking at Douglas, who was trying to figure out my grill settings like they were top secret. What? Watching your dad admit I know my way around fire. Yeah, it's therapeutic. She leaned in. You know he told the neighbors about you, right? Really? Yeah, she said, grinning. Apparently, you're the humble hero who prefers grilling to glory. Sounds like a Hallmark movie, I said. We should sell the rights. Douglas finally gave up his inspection and sat down, motioning to me. Blake, he said, you're in charge of the grill from now on. I've seen the light. What? Propane can't compete with charcoal. No, he said. You can actually cook without burning the meat or the guests. High praise, Commander. He chuckled. Don't let it go to your head. Oh, it's already there, I said. I'm thinking of having medals printed on my apron. Patricia overheard and laughed. Don't encourage him, Douglas. His ego's going to need its own chair. It already has one, Harper said, pointing to me. Hey, I protested. Confidence is just self-respect with better posture. As the afternoon rolled on, the air felt lighter than it ever had before. The usual tension, the sarcastic digs, gone. It felt like family. Loud, slightly chaotic, but warm. Douglas even started telling stories about me, which was new. So there we were, pinned down, visibility 0, and I swear to God, we thought we were done, he told Harper's cousins. Then this voice crackles over the radio, calm as Sunday morning, says, "Hold tight. I see you." We all thought it was a joke. And then, Chloe asked, hanging on his every word. And then, Douglas said, pointing his beer at me, "This lunatic flies in through a sandstorm like he's got a death wish and pulls us out one by one." We didn't even know his name then, just the call sign, Iron Widow. Everyone turned to look at me. "That's true," I said, "except for one detail." "What's that?" Douglas asked. I wasn't calm. I was swearing the whole way. Everyone burst out laughing. It was the kind of laughter that fills in years of silence. Genuine, not polite. Even Patricia joined in. "You know, Ryan," she said, smiling, "I'm proud of you." "Thank you," I said, pretending to wipe a tear. "That might be the first time you've said that." "Don't ruin it," she said, wagging a finger. "You're lucky I baked dessert." "Then I take it back," I said. "Keep the compliments coming." Chloe leaned over to Harper. "He's gotten funnier since the truth came out." Harper grinned. "No, he's just finally allowed to talk without being interrupted." "That's fair," I said. By the time the sun started setting, the grill was empty. The kids were running barefoot through sprinklers, and Douglas had officially ceded his title as barbecue commander. "You did good, Captain," he said, clapping me on the back. "Didn't think I'd ever say that about another man at my grill." "It's okay," I said. "I know how hard it is to pass command." "It's not hard," he said. "It's just different." He looked around, eyes soft. "You brought this family together today." I snorted. Pretty sure the ribs helped. "Don't sell yourself short," he said. "You've earned your spot." That hit deeper than I expected. For years, I'd been the outsider, the polite one, the quiet one, the guy they tolerated because Harper loved him. But now, I wasn't just her husband. I was family. The smoke, the laughter, the teasing. It all felt like a language I'd finally learned to speak. Later that night, when most of the guests had left, Harper and I sat on the porch watching the embers die out. "You handled today like a pro," she said. "What can I say? I thrive under pressure." "You know," she said, smiling. "They actually adore you now." "Took them long enough." "They're haze," she said. "They come around at their own speed." I nodded. "Guess so. I just didn't think it'd take a full recon mission and several burgers to get there." Just then, Douglas came back out with 2 beers. "For the grill master," he said, handing me one. "You've earned this." If I'd known all it took to get your respect was a well-seared steak, I'd have done it years ago. He laughed. "Nah, you earned it before that. We just didn't see it." He leaned against the railing, looking up at the sky. "Funny, isn't it? We spend our whole lives training for war, and then we forget how to enjoy peace." "That's why I grill," I said. "Less sand, more smoke." "I'll drink to that," he said, raising his bottle. We clinked beers in quiet understanding. Patricia came out next, holding a pie dish. "I saved you the last slice," she said. "Douglas doesn't need it. Cholesterol." "I'm right here," he said. "And still not getting the pie," she replied. "Respectfully," I said, taking the plate. "This might be your finest work yet." "Don't push your luck," she said, but she was smiling. Before heading home, Chloe walked over, carrying sleepy little Nora on her hip. "You know, Ryan," she said, "I think I finally get it." "Get what?" "Why you never said anything all those years." "You didn't need to." "Exactly," I said. "Silence hits harder when you time it right." "Well," she said, "for what it's worth, I'm glad you broke it." "Me too," I said. "Otherwise, I'd still be the paperwork pilot." She laughed softly. "You'll never let that go, will you?" "Not a chance." When we finally packed up and got in the car, Harper reached over and squeezed my hand. "So how does it feel?" she asked. "How does what feel? Being the family hero?" I smirked. "Overrated. But the catering's better now." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "Yeah," I said. "But at least I'm respected now." As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Douglas standing by the grill, watching us leave, beer in hand, pride written all over his face. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just 2 men tied together by marriage and obligation. We were equals. A soldier and a pilot, both retired from battle, but still fighting to keep peace alive, one burger at a time. And as far as family flight schools go, that's a lesson worth teaching. It's funny how the universe loves irony. One moment you're the guy flipping burgers while your in-laws debate whether you're technically military, and the next, you're flying to D.C. for a Navy commendation ceremony that even the president might attend. I wasn't the type who liked attention. I preferred quiet victories, no parades, no speeches. But when the letter came, official seal, formal tone, the kind of envelope that smells like taxpayer money, Harper nearly tackled me in excitement. You're being honored in D.C. Ryan, this is huge, she said, waving the letter like a golden ticket. I just sipped my coffee and muttered, great. My nightmare finally has a dress code. Harper wasn't having it. You're going, she said firmly. You can't spend your life downplaying everything. I'm not downplaying, I said. I'm avoiding public speaking and awkward applause. She smirked. Same thing. Douglas was even more dramatic. He called within the hour. Blake, I just heard. You're getting the commendation? Looks like it, I said. You're damn right you are, he said. I'm coming with. You don't have to, I said. It's not mandatory. Oh, it's mandatory, he replied. If anyone's gonna clap for you, it's gonna be me. I didn't have the heart to tell him I was already dreading the idea of cameras. Patricia, of course, was thrilled. Oh, we have to get matching outfits, she told Harper. Something elegant, respectful, patriotic. I looked up from my coffee. You mean red, white, and overly dramatic? Exactly, she said. Fast forward 2 weeks later, I'm standing in a hotel mirror, straightening my tie while Harper fussed with her hair. You nervous? She asked. Always, I said. About what? About surviving small talk with admirals, I said. That's more dangerous than combat. She laughed. You'll be fine. You're charming when you're miserable. Then I'll be irresistible tonight, I said. When we arrived at the Navy Hall, the place looked like a shrine to discipline. Uniforms crisp enough to slice bread, medals gleaming, flags everywhere. The air even smelled like respect and bureaucracy. Douglas was already there, standing tall in his old uniform, polished boots, chest out, eyes sharp. He hadn't worn that uniform in years, and seeing him in it again. Yeah, it hit me. The man looked proud, and not just of himself. Patricia stood beside him, clutching a tissue before the ceremony even started. You okay? I asked. I'm fine, she said, dabbing her eyes. Just allergies. To emotions? I asked. Exactly. When they called my name, Captain Ryan Blake, call sign Iron Widow, I swear I heard Douglas exhale like a man who'd been holding his breath for 15 years. I walked to the stage, the lights blinding, the applause surprisingly genuine. They pinned the medal on me, shook my hand, and I smiled just enough to look human. The MC read my citation, for exceptional valor, decisive leadership, and selfless service under extreme conditions, and all I could think about was how bad the coffee was in Kandahar that morning. After the ceremony, people swarmed. Old colleagues, officers I hadn't seen in years, even a few fresh-faced recruits who looked at me like I was carved out of legend. Sir, you're the Iron Widow? One kid asked, eyes wide. In the flesh, I said. You're a hero, he said. Nah, I said. I'm just someone who didn't crash at the wrong time. He laughed nervously, not sure if I was joking. I wasn't. Then I saw Douglas across the room. He was standing at attention, that old Navy posture kicking in, and for the first time, he didn't look like the gruff patriarch I'd come to know. He looked proud, not the silent, reluctant kind. The real kind, the one that reaches your eyes. When I stepped down from the stage, he was waiting. He saluted. Not jokingly, not half-heartedly, a full, sharp salute. You made the uniform look good, son, he said. For a second, I didn't even know what to say, so I just smiled. Don't exaggerate, Commander. You just finally found someone cooler than yourself. He grinned, lowering his hand. That's fair. Patricia was crying now. Actual tears, not the kind she blamed on allergies. I'm so proud of you, she said, hugging me like she was trying to squeeze the hero out. Chloe, of course, took a selfie. This is going on Instagram, she said. Hashtag hero in the family. Great, I said. Exactly what I trained for. Later that night, at the hotel bar, Douglas and I sat nursing beers, both quiet. Never thought I'd see the day, he said. What? Me getting a medal? No, he said. Me being in the audience for it. Usually, I'm the one up there. I raised my glass. Guess we swapped roles. He nodded. You did good, Blake. You really did. So did you, I said. You raised Harper. That's more impressive than flying through gunfire. He chuckled. You're not wrong. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled through some photos, and showed me one, an old, grainy picture of his SEAL team back in the day. He zoomed in on a helicopter behind them, half covered in dust. That's you, he said. Iron Widow. We didn't know your name back then, but we knew your voice. I stared at it, that faded image of the machine that nearly killed me and saved them. Damn, I whispered. Didn't think anyone kept that. I kept it, he said. It's the only reason any of us made it back to take that picture. Later, when Harper and I got back to the hotel room, my phone buzzed. A message from Douglas. It was that same photo, with a caption underneath. The guy who saved us married my daughter. Life's weird. I laughed so hard I nearly woke Harper. When she asked what was so funny, I just showed her the message. She smiled, that proud, soft kind of smile that makes your heart forget how to function. You know, she said. He's never said something like that before. Yeah, I said. Guess respect finally cleared customs. The next morning, we met Douglas and Patricia for breakfast. Patricia was glowing, the kind of glow only mothers get when they realize their bragging rights just doubled. I told everyone back home, she said proudly. You're famous now. Fantastic, I said. Can't wait to get recognized at Costco. Don't joke, she said. Someone will ask for a photo. If they do, I said, I'm charging per autograph. You're impossible, she said, but she was beaming. Chloe joined us late, as always, sliding into the booth like she was arriving at an after-party. So, she said, do we start calling you Captain at family dinners now? Only if I get hazard pay, I said. Fair, she said. You deserve it for surviving moms cooking all these years. Patricia gasped. Excuse me? She's right, I said quickly, ducking before Patricia could swat me with a napkin. You're both terrible. And yet, Chloe said, you keep showing up. Yeah, I said, because now the food comes with respect. By the time we flew home, I'd gotten a dozen messages from old squad mates, a few from reporters, and one from Douglas that simply said, you made us all proud. Short, simple, and somehow heavier than every medal I'd ever worn. When we landed, Harper leaned her head on my shoulder. You know, she said, you looked good up there. I look good everywhere, I said. But go on. She laughed. You deserved that moment, Ryan. Maybe, I said. But I think the best part was seeing your dad there. He'll never admit it, she said. But you've changed him. Nah, I said. I just reminded him humility's not fatal. When we got home, I placed the medal in a box with the rest, the quiet kind of trophies that never make it to the mantle. But that photo Douglas sent me, that I framed, it wasn't about glory. It was proof. Proof that respect doesn't always show up when you expect it, but when it does, it can make an entire family see you in a new light. And as far as medals go, that one, the kind you can't pin on your chest, mattered more than all the rest. A year after the DC ceremony, the Hayes family barbecue returned like clockwork. Same backyard, same overcooked enthusiasm, but a completely different energy. For once, it wasn't a battlefield. Nobody was sharpening sarcasm for sport or waiting for me to mess up the coleslaw ratio. Instead, the air felt lighter, calmer, like we'd all survived something together. Chloe had texted that morning, no muffin bribes this year, just peace and potato salad. I replied, good. My forgiveness quota is full. When I pulled up, Harper riding shotgun and the smell of Douglas's famous ribs already in the air, I knew this barbecue was going to be different. Chloe was the first to greet me. Look who decided to show up, Captain. She said, grinning. Wow, no passive aggression in the opening line, I said. Growth looks good on you. She laughed, pulling me into a hug that actually felt genuine. You'll never let that muffin thing go, will you? Not unless you start bringing donuts, I said. Donuts say sincerity. You're impossible, she said. Yeah, I said, but lovable. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, holding a casserole dish like it was a family heirloom. Ryan, dear, she called out. You'll say grace later, won't you? I nearly dropped my plate. Wait, me? You want me to say grace? Of course, she said. You're practically our good luck charm now. I looked at Harper. See? One medal and suddenly I'm the family chaplain. She smiled. Just roll with it. It's better than being the civilian son-in-law. Barely. I muttered, taking the dish from Patricia before she could injure herself. Douglas was out by the grill, of course, his natural habitat. He spotted me and grinned. There he is, the man of the hour. Commander, I said, saluting playfully. Permission to approach the grill? Granted, he said. Though you outrank me now. Please, I said. You're the family general. I'm just logistics support. You're still better with fire, he said, handing me the tongs. I figured I'd let the professional handle it this year. I took them, nodding. That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me here. Don't get sentimental, he said. I still get the first burger. Deal, I said. As long as it's medium rare, not boot camp. He laughed, and for a brief moment, it felt like friendship. Easy, warm, real. As the day rolled on, the backyard came alive with chatter and laughter that didn't carry sharp edges anymore. The cousins ran around with sparklers, Patricia played host like a woman on a redemption tour, and Chloe, bless her dramatic soul, kept referring to me as Captain Barbecue. You keep that up, I warned her, and I'm making you peel potatoes next time. You love it, she said. Don't lie. You're right, I said. I do. Feels good being adored after years of character assassination. Hey, she said, laughing. We said we were sorry. You did, I said. Multiple times. I'm just enjoying the sequel. When dinner time came around, everyone gathered around the table. The food actually looked edible. Progress. Patricia tapped her wine glass. Ryan, she said, would you say grace? I raised an eyebrow. You sure? Last time I prayed, a sandstorm stopped mid-flight. Then by all means, Douglas said, chuckling. Let's get some divine insurance for this meal. I stood, cleared my throat, and said, all right, bow your heads. Lord, thank you for family, for second chances, and for finally seasoning the chicken. The table erupted in laughter. Even Patricia laughed, the kind of laugh that meant she'd let the jab slide because she knew it came from love. Amen, I said. Let's eat before Douglas re-enlists for control of the grill. You're never living that down, are you? Douglas said. Not a chance, I replied. Dinner was loud, messy, and perfect. No judgment, no tension, no silent competitions. Chloe told stories about her job, Patricia bragged about Harper's latest promotion, and Douglas tried to convince me to teach Nora how to fly one day. She's only 7, I said. Exactly, he said. Start him young. Hayes women need altitude. She's got plenty, I said. Have you met her mother? Chloe laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. You're not wrong, she said. At one point, Douglas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin. Old, worn, the edges smooth from time. This belonged to my CO, he said quietly. The table hushed. He gave it to me after our last mission. Told me to pass it to someone I trusted to carry it forward. He turned to me. It's yours now. I froze. I can't take that, I said. Sure you can, he said. You've already earned it. Patricia's eyes glistened. Douglas, she whispered, are you sure? Absolutely, he said. He's family. I took the coin, heavier than it looked, and turned it over in my palm. The engraving was faint, but you could still make out the word Semper Fortis. Always strong. This belongs to you, I said. Give it to your granddaughter one day. Tell her what Iron Widow really means. Douglas stared at me, eyes shining. You sure? Yeah, I said, handing it back. Legacy doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to the people who remember. He nodded, slipping it back into his pocket, emotion sitting heavy in the space between us. Deal, he said. After dinner, as the sun dipped low and the sky bled into shades of orange and purple, Harper and I sat with Douglas and Patricia on the porch. The cicadas hummed, the fireflies blinked, and for once, there was no pretense, no performance. Just peace. Patricia leaned back and sighed. You know, for years I thought you were too quiet, Ryan. I mistook it for weakness. You and everyone else, I said. Turns out it was just self-control. And patience, she added. Lots of patience. Oh, I ran out of that long ago, I said. I just started using sarcasm as a substitute. And we deserved every bit of it, she said with a smile. You handled us better than we deserved. Harper rested her head on my shoulder. You realize this is the first barbecue where nobody's fighting? Yeah, I said. Almost makes me nostalgic for the chaos. Don't say that, she said, laughing. We've evolved. True, I said. Now the chaos just has better manners. Later, when everyone started packing up, Douglas pulled me aside. You know, he said, when I first met you, I thought you were too calm to be a soldier. I didn't trust it. I get that a lot, I said. But calm's not the absence of fear, Commander. It's knowing when to save your adrenaline. He smiled. You're full of one-liners, you know that. Yeah, I said. You just weren't listening before. I'm listening now, he said, and that hit harder than I expected. As the last car pulled away and the night grew quiet, I stood in the backyard, watching the smoke from the grill fade into the dark. Harper joined me, wrapping her arms around my waist. What are you thinking? She asked. Just that this used to be my least favorite place, I said. Now it feels like home. Because they finally stopped judging? She asked. Because I stopped needing them to, I said. Respect's great, but peace? That's better. She smiled, resting her chin on my shoulder. You've come a long way, Captain. We all have, I said. Even your mom. Especially my mom, she said, laughing softly. We stood there, the smell of smoke and summer still hanging in the air, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like family. Flawed, loud, chaotic, but real. The Hayes family had finally learned to look past their own reflections long enough to see the man behind the grill. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real mission all along. Not the medals, not the recognition, but the quiet victory of finally being seen. There's a special kind of peace that comes when life finally stops feeling like a performance review. Years had passed since the infamous barbecue that flipped the family dynamic on its head, and the Hayes clan had settled into something rare, functional chaos. Harper and I had a son now, Jamie, a walking combination of her smile and my stubbornness. He'd inherited my eyes and her ability to negotiate bedtime like a tiny lawyer. Douglas adored him. He's got your focus, he'd tell me, watching Jamie line up toy planes across the carpet. He's got your stubbornness, I'd reply. That's how I know he's family. It became our routine. Douglas and I weren't just tolerating each other anymore. We were allies. Patricia had even stopped calling me, our son-in-law the civilian, and switched to Captain, though she used it like a punctuation mark. Captain, want more pie? Captain, fix the Wi-Fi. Captain, why is your son teaching my dog to salute? I didn't mind. After years of sarcasm and suspicion, being their go-to problem solver felt like victory disguised as domestic life. One afternoon, I stopped by the Hayes house to find Douglas in the backyard, teaching Jamie how to salute properly. You're bending your wrist, kid, he said, adjusting Jamie's arm. It's like this. Like this. Jamie tried again, face scrunched in concentration. Perfect, Douglas said proudly. He's a natural. I leaned on the porch railing, watching the two of them, the old soldier and the new recruit, and felt something I hadn't in years, stillness. He's gonna end up bossing everyone around, I called out. Douglas turned, grinning. Then he'll fit right in. God help us, I said, walking over. He handed Jamie a juice box like it was a Medal of Honor. Respect earned, soldier. Thanks, Grandpa, Jamie said, taking a loud slurp. Douglas looked at me. You're raising him right. Yeah, I said, smiling. Trying to teach him that strength doesn't always mean shouting. You sure he's related to us? Douglas teased. He's the upgrade, I said. Same stubborn core, fewer trust issues. Inside, Patricia was arranging flowers in a vase, humming. When she saw me, she smiled, genuinely. Ryan, dear, sit. I made your favorite. Which one? I asked. All of them, she said. You've earned it. I feel like I'm being fattened for something, I said. Don't ruin the moment, she replied. It was still strange, seeing her so kind. There were days I half expected her to snap back into her old self, but she never did. Maybe guilt really was the world's best seasoning. Harper walked in then, holding a mug of tea, her eyes lighting up at the sight of me. Hey, Captain, she said softly. Hey, Trouble, I said. You look happy. I am, she said. It's nice seeing you here without needing armor. Yeah, I said, glancing around. The air's different. Less judgment, more cinnamon. Chloe arrived a few minutes later, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. Okay, I have to say it. Your kid is basically a mini you, she said, scrolling through photos. He just told me copy that when I asked if he wanted a cookie. Proud moment, I said. Next, I'll teach him to negotiate with muffins. You're never gonna drop that, are you? Not even in death, I said. She laughed, shaking her head. You've mellowed out, Captain. No, I said. I've just learned that revenge tastes better when it's caramelized over time. After dinner, we all sat around the living room, the kind of scene that would have been unthinkable years ago. Patricia knitting, Douglas telling stories, Chloe pretending not to cry laugh at Douglas's exaggerated war tales. Jamie was sitting on my lap, spinning a toy plane in his hands. What's that one called, Dad? He asked. That's a Hornet, I said. Fast. Agile. Tough. Like you, he said. Nah, I said. More like your mom. Harper smiled from across the room. Nice save, she said. I'm a professional, I replied. Douglas cleared his throat. Hey, Ryan, he said, reaching into a small box on the coffee table. Got something for you. He pulled out a framed photo. Our photo from the ceremony in D.C., both of us in uniform, shaking hands. I had it printed for Jamie's room, he said. So he knows what kind of man his dad is. I stared at it for a long moment. You didn't have to. I know, he said. That's what makes it meaningful. Patricia smiled softly. He's right. You've changed this family. No, I said. You guys just finally switched to high definition. Harper nudged me. Take the compliment, Captain. Yes, ma'am, I said, saluting. Everyone laughed. Later, as the night wound down, Douglas pulled me aside in the kitchen. You ever think about going back? He asked. Flying, I said. Every day? But no. My missions now involve school pickups and bedtime stories. Doesn't sound so bad. It's not, I said. It's peaceful. He nodded, handing me a beer. You've earned that peace. Took a while, I said. Had to survive more family dinners than firefights. Yeah, he said, chuckling. And you did both with style. Style's just survival with better posture, I said. You and your damn one-liners, he muttered, but he was smiling. When we got home, Harper tucked Jamie into bed while I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The house was dim, peaceful, a far cry from the chaos it used to be. Harper joined me, wrapping her arms around my waist. He's out cold, she whispered. He's a good kid, I said. He's got your heart. And your sarcasm, she said. So basically the perfect mix. Exactly, I said. I'm proud of him already. You should be, she said. He's going to grow up knowing exactly who his dad is. Yeah, I said softly. And maybe he won't have to prove it to anyone. We sat in silence for a moment, just breathing. Then Harper smiled. You know, I think your quiet strength thing finally rubbed off on them. Who, your family? I asked. Yeah, she said. They're calmer now. Kinder. Don't get ahead of yourself, I said. Your mom still judges the way I fold napkins. True, she said, laughing. But she loves you. She tolerates me, I said. That's progress. You're impossible. And yet irresistible, I said. It's a curse. A few weeks later, Chloe stopped by with a gift bag. Don't worry, she said. It's not muffins. Then it's already better, I said, opening it. Inside was a coffee mug that read, World's Coolest Brother-in-Law. Wow, I said. A mug of redemption. Don't make it weird, she said. I just figured, you earned it. Thank you, I said. This will look great next to my least liked son-in-law 2018 trophy. You still have that? She said, shocked. Absolutely, I said. It's a reminder of how far we've come. She laughed. You're a menace. And proud of it, I said. That evening, Harper and I sat outside watching Jamie chase fireflies in the yard. You ever think about everything that had to happen to get here? She asked. All the chaos, the insults, the muffins? Every day, I said. And weirdly, I wouldn't change a thing. Not even Chloe's jokes. Especially not those, I said. They built character. And material. She laughed. You're something else. So I've been told, I said. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Douglas's text came through. Proud of you, Captain. Tell Jamie Grandpa says keep that salute sharp. I smiled, showing it to Harper. He's getting sentimental, I said. You have that effect on people, she said. Nah, I said. I just make them laugh first so they don't notice the change sneaking up on them. When we finally went inside, I stopped by the shelf in our living room. On it sat the framed photo of the ceremony, Douglas's seal coin beside it, and now, Chloe's mug. Together, they looked like something bigger than trophies. Proof of a journey that started with mockery and ended with belonging. I thought about that first barbecue, the laughter, the humiliation, the moment it all flipped. I'd gone from the paperwork guy to the man who'd quietly redefined the family. Harper turned off the lights and slipped her hand into mine. You thinking about something deep? She asked. Always, I said. What now? Just realizing something, I said. Silence isn't strength when it hides the truth, but it is when it speaks for itself. She smiled, kissing my cheek. You really should write that down. Nah, I said. I already lived it. And as Jamie's laughter echoed faintly from his room and the world outside settled into quiet, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally done proving myself. No more paperwork. No more pretending. Just life, love, and peace earned the hard way. While I was setting the table at Thanksgiving, my wife's dad recorded a video of me and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Look at this failure. He was always a servant." My wife and her siblings laughed. I got angry and left. The next day, my wife's mother wrote, "Why can't I withdraw $2,000 from your account?" Without thinking twice, I exploded in, "Look, I'm not saying I expected a parade when I walked into the Carter household that Thanksgiving, but maybe, just maybe, a simple hey, thanks for showing up would have been nice." Instead, I got what I always got. Absolutely nothing, except a side eye from my mother-in-law, Evelyn, and a grunt from Harold, my father-in-law, who was already 3 beers deep and it wasn't even noon yet. Classic Harold. The man treated Bud Light like it was some kind of performance-enhancing drug for being a terrible human being. Sabrina, my lovely wife of 6 years, was sprawled across the couch like a cat that had just conquered a sunbeam. Her siblings, Ben, the wannabe finance bro who peaked in high school, and Tiffany, who thought posting selfies counted as a full-time job, were right there with her, all 3 of them scrolling through their phones and arguing about whose vacation photos looked more expensive. Because apparently, that's what passes for conversation in the Carter family. Not, "How are you doing?" or "What's new in your life?" but "Look at my rented yacht, peasants." Meanwhile, I was in the kitchen doing what I did best in this family, everything. I'm talking full Thanksgiving spread here, people. Turkey that I'd been brining since Tuesday, mashed potatoes from scratch because God forbid we use the instant stuff, green bean casserole with those crispy onions on top, sweet potato pie, cranberry sauce, the whole 9 yards. And who was helping me? Nobody. Sabrina claimed she'd already done so much by picking up the disposable plates from Target. Revolutionary stuff, really. I'm sure the founding fathers would have been proud. I just finished setting the dining room table, and let me tell you, I went full Martha Stewart on that thing. Silverware aligned perfectly, napkins folded into these fancy little triangles I'd learned from a YouTube video at 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep thinking about how much I was dreading this day. The plates were positioned exactly 1 inch from the edge of the table. Everything looked Instagram-worthy, which was ironic considering nobody in this family would thank me. They'd just photograph it and claim they did it themselves. That's when Harold decided to make his directorial debut. I heard him before I saw him, his footsteps heavy and uneven. That telltale sign that beer number 3 had fully kicked in. I looked up and there he was, phone out. Camera pointed directly at me like I was some kind of zoo animal. He didn't even try to be subtle about it. Just stood there in his stained polo shirt and khakis that were 2 sizes too small, recording me as I folded the last napkin. "What ya doing there, sport?" he asked with this smirk that made me want to shove that napkin down his throat. But I didn't, because I'm civilized. Or stupid. Honestly, at this point, it's hard to tell the difference. "Just finishing up the table, Harold," I said, keeping my voice level and my face neutral. I'd learned years ago that showing any emotion around these people was like throwing chum in shark-infested waters. He chuckled, that wheezy, beer-soaked laugh that made him sound like a broken lawnmower. "Always so busy, aren't ya? Always working, working, working." He said it like it was an insult, like having a work ethic was some kind of character flaw. Then he walked away, still filming, and I heard him muttering something to Evelyn about dedication in the most sarcastic tone possible. I should have known right then. I should have packed up my casserole dish and walked out. But no, I'm an optimist. Or a masochist. Again, the line's pretty blurry. By the time I got the turkey to the table, a beautiful 20-pound bird that had taken me 4 hours to cook to perfection, everyone had gathered around like vultures circling roadkill. Sabrina finally looked up from her phone long enough to say, "Oh, it's ready?" As if food magically appeared when you ignored it long enough. Ben was already reaching for the beer cooler, and Tiffany was adjusting her ring light for what I can only assume was going to be a riveting TikTok about how blessed she was. Harold was at the head of the table, naturally, because God forbid anyone else sit in the throne. He cleared his throat like he was about to give the State of the Union address, and everyone quieted down. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was going to say grace or thank me for the meal, or literally anything that resembled human decency. Instead, he held up his phone and said, "Y'all gotta see this. Just posted it on Facebook." My stomach dropped. I knew. I just knew. He turned his phone around, and there I was on his Facebook feed, folding napkins in real time, looking like some kind of domestic servant. But it wasn't the video that made my blood run cold. It was the caption underneath. "Look at this failure. He was always a servant." The table erupted in laughter. Not polite chuckles or awkward giggles, but full-on, doubled over, tears streaming down faces laughter. Ben slapped the table so hard the silverware jumped. Tiffany was wheezing. Even Evelyn, who usually pretended to have some semblance of class, was covering her mouth to hide her smile. And Sabrina? My wife, the woman who promised to love and cherish me through sickness and health, for better or worse. She was laughing hardest of all. "Oh my God, Dad, you didn't," she managed to say between gasps. "I did," Harold said proudly, like he'd just cured cancer instead of publicly humiliating his son-in-law on social media. Ben wiped his eyes and looked at me with this condescending grin. "Hey, you missed a spot, Jeeves." Jeeves. Like I was some kind of butler. Like I hadn't just spent the last 12 hours preparing a feast for these ungrateful parasites. The table erupted in laughter again, and something inside me just snapped. Not in a dramatic, explosive way. More like a quiet click, like a lock finally turning after years of being jammed. I stood up slowly, carefully, making sure not to knock over any of the dishes I'd so meticulously prepared. Everyone was still laughing, too caught up in their own hilarity to notice that I wasn't. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair, and that's when Sabrina finally looked up. "Where are you going?" she asked, confused, like I was the one being unreasonable. I didn't answer. I just smiled, this calm, peaceful smile that probably made me look absolutely insane, and walked toward the door. No dramatic speech. No flipping the table or throwing dishes. Just a man quietly reclaiming his dignity one step at a time, even though there was still mashed potato residue on my sleeve from where Tiffany had accidentally bumped into me earlier. As I reached the front door, I heard Harold call out, "Come on, sport, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, turned around one last time, and looked at every single one of them. Sabrina looked annoyed. Ben looked amused. Tiffany was already back on her phone. Harold and Evelyn were exchanging glances like I was the problem. "Enjoy your turkey," I said quietly. Then I walked out, closing the door behind me with a soft click that somehow felt louder than slamming it ever could have. The November air hit my face like a wake-up call, cold and sharp and honest. I stood on that porch for a moment, breathing it in, feeling lighter than I had in years despite the weight of what I'd just walked away from. Somewhere behind me, I could hear muffled laughter still echoing through the walls. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them eat their turkey and take their pictures and post their little updates about how perfect their lives are. I was done being the punchline to their joke. I was done being the servant in someone else's story. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away from that house, leaving behind 6 years of mashed potatoes, folded napkins, and the last shred of respect I had for the Carter family. And I didn't look back once. I woke up the next morning on Derek's couch feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, then reversed over for good measure, and maybe run over one more time just for fun. My neck was bent at an angle that definitely wasn't approved by any chiropractor. My back was screaming obscenities at me, and there was a mysterious stain on the couch cushion that I was choosing to ignore for the sake of my mental health. Derek's place was your classic bachelor pad. Empty pizza boxes stacked like modern art. A TV that was somehow always on ESPN even when nobody was watching. And a smell that could only be described as Axe body spray mixed with regret and old gym socks. Derek himself was in the kitchen making what he called coffee, but what actually looked like motor oil. The man thought adding 5 scoops of instant coffee to a cup of lukewarm water was artisanal brewing. I'd crashed here around midnight after driving around aimlessly for 2 hours, my phone buzzing nonstop with messages from Sabrina that I'd expertly ignored. Derek had opened the door, taken one look at my face, said the Carters, and I just nodded. He'd pointed to the couch, tossed me a blanket that smelled vaguely like Doritos, and that was that. No questions asked. This is why Derek was my best friend. The man understood that sometimes you just needed a couch and silence, not a therapy session. I was lying there contemplating whether my spine would ever forgive me when my phone started vibrating on the coffee table like it was possessed. I reached for it with the enthusiasm of someone reaching for a live grenade. The screen lit up with a text message, and when I saw who it was from, I actually laughed out loud, that kind of unhinged, slightly manic laugh that probably should have concerned me. It was from Evelyn, Sabrina's mom. The woman who once told me at a family barbecue that I seemed like the type who peaked in high school, even though I was a college graduate with a stable job and her daughter had literally peaked at her Sweet 16 party. The message read, "Why can't I withdraw $2,000 from your account?" I stared at that text for a solid 30 seconds, my brain trying to process the sheer audacity. Not "good morning." Not "is everything okay after yesterday?" Not even a "sorry my husband publicly humiliated you on Facebook and called you a failure." Nope. Just straight to "why can't I steal your money?" Excuse me? Excuse me? I sat up so fast that my back made a cracking sound that would have made a chiropractor weep. Derek looked over from the kitchen, spatula in hand, eggs burning behind him. "You good, man?" he asked. "Dude," I said, holding up my phone like it was evidence in a trial. "My mother-in-law just texted me asking why she can't withdraw $2,000 from my account." Derek's jaw dropped. The spatula fell to the floor. The eggs were definitely on fire now. "I'm sorry, what? Like, from your account? Your money?" "Apparently I've been promoted from family servant to family ATM," I said, scrolling through my phone. "And now the ATM has technical difficulties, so she's filing a complaint." That's when I noticed there were more messages. 7, to be exact. All from various members of the Carter clan, all with variations of the same theme. "What's wrong with the account? Did you change something? This is really inconvenient." Not one single message about Thanksgiving. Not one apology. Just a bunch of vultures upset that their meal ticket had suddenly grown a spine. I looked at Derek, who had now abandoned the smoking eggs entirely and was staring at me like I'd just told him aliens were real. "Bro, they've been taking money from your account. Joint account." I corrected him, though that didn't make it any better. "Sabrina convinced me to open it 2 years ago. Said it would make bills easier. Said it showed I trusted her family." I laughed bitterly. Turns out trust meant giving them unlimited access to my checking account like it was a community piggy bank. Derek shook his head slowly. "That's insane, man. That's genuinely insane." And you know what? He was right. It was insane. But somehow, in the moment when Sabrina had suggested it, sitting in her parents' living room with everyone nodding encouragingly like I was joining a cult, it had seemed reasonable. They'd made it sound like this was what families did. Like I was being difficult by hesitating. Like my reluctance to merge my finances with people who thought I was a failure was somehow proof that I didn't love Sabrina enough. Well, congratulations to the Carter family. You played yourself. I opened my banking app with hands that were surprisingly steady. No shaking, no hesitation. Just pure, crystallized clarity. I navigated to the joint account, the one that I'd been funding for 2 years while apparently everyone else had been treating it like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The balance was lower than I remembered. Significantly lower. I started scrolling through the transaction history, and oh boy, was that a journey. There were withdrawals I definitely didn't make. A $500 charge at some boutique in downtown that I'd never heard of. Multiple $200 ATM withdrawals. A $350 charge at a steakhouse the same week I'd eaten ramen for 4 days straight because I was saving money. These people had been living large on my dime while I'd been budgeting like I was preparing for the apocalypse. "Those absolute parasites," I muttered, my thumb scrolling faster and faster. Derek had moved to sit next to me, abandoning the kitchen entirely. The smoke alarm was going off now, but neither of us cared. "How much have they taken?" "I don't even want to calculate it," I said, but my brain was already doing the math. Thousands. Easily thousands over the past 2 years. Money I'd worked overtime for. Money I'd saved by bringing lunch to work instead of eating out. Money I'd put aside thinking maybe Sabrina and I could finally take that trip to Japan she always talked about. Except now I knew where that Japan money had gone. Straight into Harold's beer fund and Tiffany's ring light collection. I took a deep breath, and then I did something that felt both reckless and absolutely necessary. I called the bank. At 9 in the morning on a Friday, I called my bank, got connected to a representative named Patricia who sounded way too cheerful for the crime I was about to commit, and I said the magic words. I need to close my joint account and transfer everything to a new personal account. Patricia, bless her, didn't ask questions. She just said, I can absolutely help you with that, sir. And 20 minutes later, it was done. The joint account was closed. Every remaining penny, which wasn't much, thanks to the Carter family shopping sprees, was transferred to a brand new account that only I had access to. No joint holders. No family members with withdrawal privileges. Just me, myself, and I. The second I hung up, my phone exploded. And I mean exploded. Text messages started flooding in like I'd just announced the end of the world. Evelyn was first. What did you do? Followed immediately by Harold. The account's closed? What's your problem? Then Ben. Real mature dude. Then Tiffany with about 15 crying emojis, and this is so unfair. And finally, Sabrina. We need to talk. Now. I looked at Derek, who was watching this unfold with the fascination of someone witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. Should I answer? Absolutely not, he said firmly. Let them sweat. So I did. I watched those messages come in, one after another, each one more desperate and angry than the last. Evelyn sent 8 messages in a row, each one calling me increasingly creative versions of selfish. Harold sent a text that just said grow up. It was just a joke, which made me want to throw my phone through his living room window. A joke. The man called me a failure on Facebook. His family had been draining my bank account for 2 years, and apparently, all of this was just one big hilarious joke that I was too sensitive to understand. Derek got up and turned off the smoke alarm, which had been wailing this whole time. He came back with 2 bottles of beer, even though it wasn't even 10 in the morning yet, handed me one, and raised his in a toast. To closing accounts and opening eyes, he said. I clinked my bottle against his. To realizing you've been married to a family of con artists. We drank, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. Sure, my marriage was probably over. Sure, I was currently homeless and sleeping on a couch that had mysterious stains. Sure, my in-laws were probably plotting my murder via angry text message. But my bank account, that was mine again. And sometimes, that's where you have to start. By that evening, Derek's couch had officially declared war on my spine, and I needed a new refuge before I ended up needing physical therapy for the rest of my life. That's when I remembered Aunt Lucille, my mom's sister, the woman who'd raised me for 3 years after my parents divorced and Dad disappeared to find himself in Colorado. Spoiler alert. He found a 23-year-old ski instructor named Brandy instead, but that's a different story for a different therapy session. Aunt Lucille lived in this small house on the east side of town, the kind of place that smelled like vanilla candles and had those decorative roosters in the kitchen that served absolutely no purpose, but somehow made everything feel like home. She was 72 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and could intimidate a biker gang with nothing but a wooden spoon and a disappointed look. I'd called her around 4 in the afternoon, and before I could even finish explaining the situation, she'd said, "Get over here. I'm making chicken. That's Aunt Lucille for you." No judgment. No lectures, just fried chicken and unconditional support. The woman was a saint in orthopedic shoes. I showed up at her door around 6 with nothing but the clothes on my back and a duffel bag I'd borrowed from Derek that smelled like his gym socks. Aunt Lucille took one look at me, shook her head, and pulled me into a hug that somehow made me feel like I was 10 years old again, and my biggest problem was failing a spelling test. "Come on in, baby," she said, using that term of endearment she'd been calling me since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. "Dinner's almost ready, and you look like you've been hit by a bus." "More like a whole family of buses," I muttered, following her inside. Her living room was exactly as I remembered it. Floral couch that was probably older than me, coffee table covered in Reader's Digest magazines from 2003, and pictures of family members covering every available surface. There was even still a photo of me from my high school graduation, looking awkward in a cap and gown that was 2 sizes too big. Simpler times, when my biggest concern was whether I'd get into a decent college, not whether my in-laws were committing financial fraud. Lucille disappeared into the kitchen and returned 5 minutes later with a plate piled so high with fried chicken that it could have fed a small army. There were mashed potatoes, coleslaw, biscuits that were still steaming, and gravy that looked like it could solve world peace. She set it down in front of me on the coffee table and settled into her recliner with her own plate. Now eat, she commanded. And then you can tell me about whatever nonsense that wife of yours has pulled this time. See, Aunt Lucille had never liked Sabrina. She'd told me at my wedding, literally during the reception while we were cutting the cake, that Sabrina had the eyes of a woman who'd never washed a dish in her life. I'd laughed it off back then, thought she was just being overprotective. Turns out Aunt Lucille could spot a red flag from a mile away, probably because she'd lived through her own fair share of terrible relationships and had developed some kind of sixth sense for detecting nonsense. I ate while I talked, telling her everything. The Thanksgiving disaster, Harold's Facebook post, the joint account revelation, all of it. She listened quietly, occasionally nodding or making small disapproving sounds, but mostly just letting me vent while I demolished piece after piece of chicken. By the time I finished talking, I'd eaten half the plate and felt marginally more human. Well, Lucille said finally, setting down her fork with a deliberate clink. That family's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. And your wife? She shook her head. Men don't cry over women who can't boil water, baby. Remember that. God bless Aunt Lucille and her country wisdom that somehow always made perfect sense. I was about to respond, probably to agree with her wholeheartedly, when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I'd been ignoring it all evening. The messages had finally slowed down after I'd blocked Evelyn and Harold, but this one made my blood run cold. It was from Ben, Sabrina's insufferable brother, the guy who wore Vineyard Vines shirts and thought quoting The Wolf of Wall Street made him sound sophisticated. I picked up my phone, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor and possibly into the earth's core. It was a photo. My man cave. The one room in that godforsaken house that was supposed to be mine, the place where I'd hung my vintage movie posters and set up my gaming console and arranged my collection of graphic novels, was destroyed. And I don't mean messy. I mean absolutely annihilated. The furniture was flipped over. My posters were torn down, some of them ripped in half. My TV was face down on the floor, screen probably shattered. Books were scattered everywhere like someone had thrown them against the walls. My collectible action figures, the ones I'd been gathering since I was 12 years old, were knocked over, some clearly broken. It looked like a tornado had gone through there. Except tornadoes are natural disasters, and this was clearly deliberate. The caption under the photo read, "Cleaning day, buddy," with a little smiley face emoji, because apparently, destruction of property is hilarious when you're a Carter. Before I could even process what I was looking at, another message came through. This time from Tiffany, Ben's sister, the girl who thought influencer was a real career path. She'd sent another photo, this one showing her holding up a pair of my Superman socks, the ones my mom had given me before she passed away, one of the last birthday presents she ever bought me, and grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Her message said, "We saved your superhero socks though, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy," followed by about 12 more laughing emojis, because subtlety had never been her strong suit. I stared at my phone, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was something colder, more calculated. It was the feeling you get when you realize that being nice hasn't gotten you anywhere, and maybe it's time to try a different approach. Aunt Lucille noticed the change in my expression. "What is it?" she asked, leaning forward in her recliner. I showed her the photos without saying a word. She looked at them, her face going through several expressions. Confusion, shock, and finally settling on pure fury. For a 72-year-old woman who stood barely 5 feet tall, she suddenly looked like she could fight God and win. "Those absolute hooligans," she hissed. "That's destruction of property. That's illegal, baby. You could call the cops right now." I could. She was right. I absolutely could call the police and report this. But looking at those photos, at Ben's smug caption and Tiffany's mocking message, I realized something. The cops would slap them with maybe a misdemeanor, maybe a fine. They'd get a stern talking to and walk away thinking they'd won because they'd gotten under my skin. No, that wasn't enough. Not even close. I set my phone down on the coffee table, face up so I could still see those photos, and I looked at Aunt Lucille. She must have seen something in my expression because her eyes widened slightly. "What are you thinking?" she asked carefully. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, my voice calm and steady in a way that surprised even me, "that I've been playing defense this whole time. I've been taking hits, absorbing insults, letting them treat me like garbage because I thought that's what you do when you love someone. You take it. You endure. You turn the other cheek. And now, Lucille prompted. I picked up another piece of chicken, took a bite, and smiled. Not a happy smile. Not even a particularly nice smile. It was the kind of smile that probably should have come with a warning label. Now, I said, now it's war. Aunt Lucille studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Good. Those people have had it coming for a long time. Just promise me one thing. What's that? She pointed her fork at me like a weapon. Promise me you'll do it smart. Don't get yourself arrested or do anything stupid, but make them regret ever treating you like dirt. I raised my glass of sweet tea and a toast. Aunt Lucille, I promise you, when I'm done, the Carter family is going to wish they'd never met me. She clinked her glass against mine. That's my boy. I spent the rest of the evening plotting, planning, and eating the best fried chicken I'd had in years. And somewhere across town, the Carter family was probably celebrating their little act of vandalism, completely unaware that they'd just poked a bear that was tired of hibernating. Game on. The next morning, I woke up in Aunt Lucille's guest room, which was essentially a museum dedicated to the 1980s, complete with floral wallpaper and a bedspread that looked like it had survived several decades of questionable decorating choices, with a mission. A clear, focused, absolutely not going to end well for the Carters' mission. I needed my stuff. My laptop with all my work files, my passport, my clothes that didn't smell like Derek's gym bag, and whatever shreds of dignity I could salvage from that house before the Carter family decided to have a bonfire with my belongings. But there was no way in hell I was going back there myself. That would be walking straight into an ambush, and I'd watched enough action movies to know that the guy who walks into enemy territory alone usually ends up in a body bag, or at least severely inconvenienced. So I called the only person I knew who was both related to the Carters and somehow hadn't inherited their DNA-level dysfunction, my cousin Logan. Logan was Evelyn's nephew from her sister's side, which technically made him Sabrina's cousin too, but he'd always been more my friend than theirs. Probably because he was the only person in that family tree who didn't need a trust fund and a therapist to have a functional personality. The guy worked as a contractor, drove a beat-up Ford F-150 that had seen better decades, and had this remarkable ability to see through people's garbage behavior without needing a PhD in psychology. I called him around 8 in the morning, knowing he'd be up because construction guys operate on a schedule that makes roosters look lazy. He answered on the second ring. Please tell me you finally left that circus, were his first words. No hello, no good morning. Just straight to the point. That's why I liked Logan better, I said, sitting up in bed and wincing as my back reminded me that I was 32 and sleeping on couches and guest beds for 3 days straight. I left. They destroyed my man cave, and now I need someone to go get my stuff before they decide to sell it on Craigslist or use it for target practice. There was a pause. They destroyed your man cave? Like, how destroyed are we talking? Like Hurricane Katrina met a frat party and they both decided to take out their issues on my stuff. Logan let out a low whistle. Man, that family just keeps getting classier. Yeah, I'll go. Give me an hour. I've got some supplies to pick up anyway, and honestly, I've been waiting for an excuse to tell Harold what I think of him. Logan, I appreciate the support, but maybe don't start World War III in the living room. No promises, he said cheerfully and hung up. An hour and 15 minutes later, Logan operated on what I called contractor time, which meant whenever I get there, my phone rang. I'd been helping Aunt Lucille organize her spice cabinet, which was a journey through expired seasonings dating back to the Clinton administration, when Logan's name popped up on my screen. That bad? I answered. Dude. Logan's voice had that quality that meant he was either really angry or really impressed, possibly both. I've seen crime scenes that looked more respectful than your room. What did you do to these people? Kill their dog? Insult their mother? Exist. Mostly the last one, I said, abandoning the paprika from 1997. Were you able to grab anything? Yeah, I got your laptop. Found it shoved in a closet, by the way, which is weird. Your passport was in the nightstand, still there thank God. Grabbed some clothes, your toothbrush, that framed photo of your mom you kept on the dresser. Oh, and I found your backup hard drive under the bed. Did you know about that hiding spot? Yeah, I put it there specifically because I didn't trust anyone in that house. Guess I was right. Guess you were. I heard some rustling on his end, the sound of boxes being moved. But here's the thing that's really messed up. They opened your safe. My blood went cold. They what? Your safe? The one in the closet. It's been pried open. Like, someone literally took a crowbar to it. The door's hanging off, and whatever was in there is gone. I sat down on Aunt Lucille's couch, my legs suddenly feeling like they couldn't support my weight. The safe. I'd kept important documents in there: birth certificate, social security card, the title to my car, some savings bonds my grandmother had given me before she died. Not to mention about $800 in emergency cash that I'd been saving for. Well, for emergencies. Which apparently now included my own family robbing me blind. Everything? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything. It's completely empty. I'm sorry, man. Aunt Lucille, who had excellent hearing for someone her age, appeared in the doorway with a look that could melt steel. They broke into his safe? She mouthed. I nodded, and she threw her dish towel down like she was challenging someone to a duel. Logan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can you take pictures of everything? The man cave, the safe, all of it. And then get out of there before someone comes home. Way ahead of you. Already took about 40 photos. And don't worry, I'm grabbing the rest of your stuff now. Your comic books are mostly intact, by the way. Some of the bags are torn, but the comics themselves look okay. Oh, and I found your grandmother's quilt in the garage. It's dirty but not damaged. My grandmother's quilt. The one she'd made by hand over the course of 2 years, every stitch representing hours of love and care. They'd thrown it in the garage like it was trash. I felt something in my chest tighten, that specific kind of pain that comes from realizing the people you thought were family never actually cared about you at all. Thanks, Logan, I managed to say. Seriously, I owe you. You don't owe me anything, man. This is what family's supposed to do. Actual family, not those vultures you married into. I'm packing up the truck now. Where do you want me to drop this stuff? I gave him Aunt Lucille's address, and he promised to be there within the hour. True to his word, 55 minutes later, his truck pulled up in front of the house, bed loaded with boxes and trash bags full of my salvage belongings. He looked tired and angry, his usual easygoing expression replaced with something harder. We unloaded everything into Lucille's garage, which she'd cleared out specifically for this purpose. As we worked, Logan filled me in on the details I didn't want to hear but needed to know. Sabrina wasn't there, he said, carrying a box of books. But Tiffany was. She saw me and tried to act all innocent, like, oh hey Logan, what are you doing here? I told her I was getting your stuff before you called the cops. That shut her up real quick. Did she say anything else? Just that you were overreacting and that it was just stuff. I told her that just stuff included breaking and entering and theft, and suddenly she remembered she had somewhere to be. He shook his head. That whole family's delusional, man. They genuinely think they did nothing wrong. We finished unloading, and Logan stuck around for a beer and some of Lucille's leftover chicken. We sat in the backyard, the afternoon sun warm on our faces, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal. Then my phone rang. Evelyn's name flashed on the screen. Logan saw it and raised his eyebrows. You gonna answer that? I stared at the phone, watching it vibrate in my hand. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail and deal with whatever crisis she was manufacturing later. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Hello. He's a monster. Evelyn's voice came through the speaker, high-pitched and hysterical. She was crying. That theatrical kind of crying that sounded more like a performance than genuine emotion. Harold told everyone at the club that you needed a lesson in humility. He said you were getting too big for your britches, and that someone had to take you down a peg. I looked at Logan, who could clearly hear every word. He made a jerking-off motion with his hand, and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. A lesson in humility, I repeated flatly. Right? By stealing from me, destroying my property, and publicly humiliating me. That's some lesson. You don't understand, she wailed. He's drinking so much now. He's telling everyone you're the reason our family is falling apart. People are asking questions about the Facebook post, and he's embarrassed. He's embarrassed, I said, letting the words hang in the air. He's embarrassed. Lady, I just got demoted from husband to unpaid butler to accused thief. And your husband is embarrassed? Don't you talk to me like that. I'm still your mother-in-law. For now, I said quietly, and the line went dead. I set my phone down and looked at Logan, who was grinning like he'd just witnessed the best show on earth. Aunt Lucille had appeared at the back door, clearly having heard everything. Well, she said, hands on her hips. Sounds like Harold's chickens are coming home to roost. I leaned back in my chair and stared up at the sky, watching clouds drift by in shapes that probably meant something if you believed in that kind of thing. Somewhere across town, Harold was probably 3 drinks deep, spinning stories to his golf buddies about how his son-in-law was the problem. Evelyn was probably crying into her wine glass. The Carter family machine was breaking down, and I hadn't even really started yet. You know what the crazy thing is? I said to no one in particular. I actually believed they cared about me. For 6 years, I convinced myself that family meant something to them. Logan crushed his beer can and tossed it into the recycling bin with perfect accuracy. Some people don't deserve families, man. They just collect people and use them up until there's nothing left. He was right. And as I sat there in Aunt Lucille's backyard, surrounded by boxes of my salvaged life, I made myself a promise. I was done being used. The Carters wanted to teach me a lesson in humility? Fine. I'd teach them one in consequences. The next few days passed in this weird limbo where I existed somewhere between recently liberated and probably should see a therapist. I'd set up camp in Aunt Lucille's guest room, surrounded by boxes of my salvaged belongings, and spent most of my time alternating between working remotely on my laptop and staring at the ceiling wondering how my life had turned into a daytime soap opera. Except soap operas had better writing and the villains were usually more subtle. I'd put my phone on Do Not Disturb, which was probably the smartest decision I'd made since leaving that Thanksgiving dinner. The messages kept coming. I could see the notification count climbing every time I glanced at the screen, but I ignored them all. There's something deeply satisfying about watching people spiral into panic when they realize their punching bag has left the ring. It's like watching a bully realize the kid they've been tormenting just transferred schools and took all his lunch money with him. Aunt Lucille had been an absolute saint through all of this. She'd knock on my door every morning with coffee and a pep talk that usually involved some variation of "those people are dumber than a box of rocks, and you're better off without them." She'd also started baking stress pies, her term, not mine, which meant I gained approximately 5 pounds in 3 days, but felt emotionally supported, so it balanced out. It was Tuesday afternoon, I think. The days had started blending together like a badly mixed smoothie when I made the mistake of opening Instagram. I don't know what possessed me to do it. Morbid curiosity, probably. That same impulse that makes you slow down to look at a car accident even though you know you're not going to like what you see. And there it was. Sabrina's Instagram story, posted 6 hours ago, already viewed by 300 people who I'm sure were just eating up the drama. She was at some upscale wine bar downtown, the kind of place that charges $18 for a glass of Pinot Grigio and calls it rustic, holding a champagne flute and smiling like she'd just won the lottery. Her makeup was perfect, her hair was styled in those loose waves that somehow always looked effortless even though I knew it took her an hour with a curling iron, and she was wearing that blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The caption read, "Some people can't handle a joke." Clinking glasses sparkles. I stared at that screen for a solid minute, my brain trying to process the sheer, unfiltered audacity. Some people can't handle a joke. Right. If joke means public defamation by your in-laws, financial theft, and destruction of personal property, then yeah, guilty as charged, Your Honor. Lock me up and throw away the key because I clearly can't take a joke. The comments section was even better, and by better, I mean absolutely infuriating. Her friends were all there with their supportive little emoji-filled messages. "You're glowing queen. His loss." Men are so sensitive these days, faced with rolling eyes. One person even wrote, "You deserve better than someone who can't laugh at themselves." And I genuinely wondered if these people had suffered some kind of mass head injury that affected their ability to understand basic human decency. But here's what really got me. Not a single person in those comments knew the full story. They saw Sabrina's carefully curated narrative, the wronged wife whose husband couldn't take a harmless family joke, and they bought it wholesale. Nobody asked questions. Nobody said, "Hey, maybe there's more to this story." They just lined up to validate her victim complex like she was handing out free designer handbags. I closed Instagram before I did something stupid like leave a comment explaining exactly what their queen and her family had been up to. That's what they wanted, a reaction, a public meltdown they could screenshot and share around. Well, tough luck. I'd already given the Carter family 6 years of reactions. They weren't getting another one. I was about to toss my phone aside and maybe stress-eat another piece of Aunt Lucille's pecan pie when my email notification pinged. Usually, I ignored those too, mostly just spam from retailers I'd bought from once 3 years ago, but this one caught my attention because the subject line read, "Checking in." The sender was Richard Morrison, Harold's boss. I sat up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. Richard Morrison was the regional director at the investment firm where Harold worked, and I'd met him exactly twice. Once at the company holiday party where Harold had introduced me as my daughter's husband, like I didn't have a name, and once at some charity golf tournament where Harold had spent 4 hours trying to impress him while I carried his clubs like a caddy. Morrison had seemed nice enough both times. One of those professional executive types who wore expensive suits and remembered everyone's names and made you feel like you were the most important person in the room, even when you weren't. I opened the email with hands that were suddenly shaking slightly. "Hi there." It began, casual and friendly in that way that successful business people have perfected. "I hope this message finds you well. I came across a video that Harold posted on Facebook last week, and I wanted to reach out personally to check if everything is okay." The caption seemed concerning. "If you ever need someone to talk to, or if there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know workplace dynamics can sometimes spill over into personal lives, and I want to make sure everyone in our extended company family is doing all right. Best regards, Richard Morrison." I read it 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Harold's boss, his boss, had seen the video. The one where Harold filmed me setting the table and called me a failure. The one where he'd publicly humiliated me for the entertainment of his Facebook friends. And not only had Morrison seen it, but he'd found it concerning enough to email me personally. Oh, this was beautiful. This was poetry. This was karma arriving via corporate email with perfect grammar and professional courtesy. I called Logan immediately. He answered on the first ring, probably because he could sense when drama was about to unfold. The man had instincts. "Please tell me you've got good news," he said by way of greeting. I could hear power tools in the background. He was clearly on a job site. "Harold's boss saw the video," I said, unable to keep the grin out of my voice. "He emailed me asking if I'm okay." There was a pause, then Logan started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on, gasping for air belly laugh that probably made his coworkers think he'd lost his mind. "You're kidding. Please tell me you're not kidding." "Dead serious." Morrison, that's his boss, sent me this super professional, super concerned email about the concerning caption and offered to help if I need anything. "Oh man," Logan wheezed between laughs. "Harold's probably crapping his pants right now. You know how paranoid he is about his job. He talks about Morrison like the guy's his dad or something." He was right. Harold was obsessed with impressing Richard Morrison. He'd spent years trying to climb the corporate ladder at that firm, networking and schmoozing and playing golf with people he probably didn't even like. The last thing he'd want is for his boss to think he was some kind of family tyrant who publicly humiliated people for fun. I spent the next 10 minutes crafting a response to Morrison's email. It needed to be perfect, professional but honest, concerned but not overdramatic. I went through about 15 drafts before settling on something that essentially said, "Thank you for reaching out. The situation has been difficult, but I'm managing. I appreciate your concern and your professionalism." With just enough subtext to suggest that yes, Harold's behavior had been as inappropriate as it looked. I hit send and immediately felt this rush of satisfaction. Not revenge, exactly. More like justice. Harold had tried to humiliate me publicly, and now his boss was asking questions. The internet had done what it does best, remembered his stupidity longer than his paycheck. Aunt Lucille appeared in my doorway holding a tray with sweet tea and cookies. "You're smiling," she observed. "That's either really good or really bad." Harold's boss saw the video and emailed me to see if I'm okay, I said, still grinning. She set the tray down and smiled. That slow, satisfied smile that said she'd lived long enough to know that karma always collected its debts eventually. Well. Looks like Harold's little joke isn't so funny anymore, is it?" "Nope," I said, taking a cookie. "Turns out public humiliation is only fun until your boss starts asking questions about your character." My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize at first, then realized it was Harold's work phone. The message was short. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." I showed it to Lucille, who snorted. "Out of hand? Now it's out of hand?" Not when they were stealing from you or destroying your things. She was right. Everything had been perfectly fine when I was the one suffering. But now that there were actual consequences for Harold, suddenly things were getting out of hand. Suddenly, we needed to talk. Suddenly, there was urgency. I typed back a simple response. No thanks. Talk to your boss instead. Then I blocked his work number 2, finished my cookie, and spent the rest of the evening researching divorce lawyers. Because if the Carter family thought this was getting out of hand now, they hadn't seen anything yet. The man who mocked me online was about to learn a very important lesson. The internet never forgets. Employers care about reputation. And sometimes the quiet guy who set the table had been taking notes the whole time. Game on, Harold. Game on. It was Thursday morning when Logan showed up at Aunt Lucille's house looking like he'd just discovered aliens were real and they were running a Ponzi scheme. He was holding a manila envelope like it might explode at any second, and his expression was somewhere between confused and absolutely furious. Which, coming from Logan, who was usually the most laid-back person I'd ever met, was saying something. "You need to see this," he said, not even bothering with a greeting. He walked straight past me into the living room where Aunt Lucille was watching her morning game shows and slapped the envelope down on the coffee table like he was serving legal papers. "Good morning to you too," I said, following him. "What is that?" "Found it on Harold's porch about an hour ago. I went back to grab that box of your winter clothes from the garage, you know, the one with your good coat, and this was just sitting there. It's addressed to you." I picked up the envelope. Sure enough, my name was scrawled across the front in handwriting that I recognized immediately, Harold's. The man wrote like a doctor having a seizure, all slanted letters and incomprehensible loops. There was no postage, no return address, just my name and the word important, underlined 3 times like he thought emphasis made him more credible. Aunt Lucille muted her show and turned to watch. "This ought to be good," she said, settling deeper into her recliner like she was preparing for a performance. I opened the envelope carefully, half expecting glitter to explode out like some kind of passive-aggressive greeting card. Instead, 2 old photographs fell out and landed on the coffee table. Wedding photos. One of Sabrina and me cutting the cake, both of us smiling like we'd just won the lottery instead of signing up for 6 years of psychological warfare. The other was from the reception, me in my tuxedo looking way too optimistic about my future, surrounded by the Carter family who were all grinning like they'd just successfully sold a timeshare to someone who didn't want one. "Subtle," Logan muttered, picking up one of the photos. "Nothing says, I'm about to apologize, like sending someone pictures of happier times." But the photos were just the opening act. The real show was the 4 pages of handwritten letter paper tucked inside the envelope. I pulled them out and immediately regretted every decision that had led me to this moment. Harold's handwriting was even worse when he was trying to be sincere. It looked like he'd written this while riding a mechanical bull during an earthquake. I started reading out loud, because this kind of masterpiece needed an audience. "Dear son," I began, and Logan immediately snorted. "Oh, we're starting with dear son. That's rich. He's never called me that to my face. But sure, we're family now that he needs something." I continued. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Thanksgiving, and I realize now that maybe I didn't handle things the right way." I looked up. Maybe he didn't handle things right. Not, I was completely wrong, or I'm a terrible person. Just maybe. Aunt Lucille shook her head. "Keep reading. This is better than my stories. You were never easy to understand." I read, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You always kept to yourself, always working, always busy. We never really knew what you were thinking." I paused. Right, because making conversation with people who think I'm a failure seemed like such a great use of my time. Logan was pacing now, his contractor boots making small thuds on Lucille's carpet. "This is unbelievable. He's making it your fault that you didn't enjoy being insulted." "Oh, it gets better," I said, scanning ahead. "You acted like you were better than us sometimes. Always so proper, so careful with your words. It made us uncomfortable." I laughed, that sharp, bitter laugh that comes out when something is so absurd you can't even process it normally. I acted better than them. I acted better. I was literally their servant. I cooked their meals. I cleaned up after them. I let them drain my bank account. How exactly was I acting superior? By using complete sentences? Maybe by not committing fraud? Logan suggested. That probably made them feel bad about themselves. I kept reading, getting angrier with each sentence. Harold went on for 3 pages about how misunderstood he was, how family dynamics are complicated, how jokes sometimes go too far, and how he never meant to hurt me. It was a masterclass in non-apology apologies, the kind of thing a politician would write after getting caught doing something illegal, but not quite illegal enough to go to jail for. And then I got to page 4, and my blood turned to ice. There's something I need to tell you, I read slowly. Something I've been meaning to explain for a while now. I once took a small loan in your name, just a small one, to help with some business expenses. I planned to pay it off before you noticed. I thought I was protecting the family, protecting Sabrina's future. But things got complicated and... He what? Logan shouted, startling Aunt Lucille so badly she nearly dropped her coffee mug. I couldn't speak. I just stared at that sentence, reading it over and over like maybe I'd misunderstood, like maybe Harold had written, I once took a small loan application, or I once thought about taking a loan, but no. There it was, in black and white, written in his terrible handwriting. He'd taken out a loan in my name. Identity theft. Fraud. A federal crime, spelled out in a confession letter like it was just some minor oopsie that anyone could make. That son of a... Lucille started, then caught herself. That absolute criminal. How much? Logan asked, and I realized I'd stopped reading. I scanned the rest of the page, but Harold hadn't included that detail. Probably because he knew that any amount would sound bad when you were confessing to identity theft. My hands were shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from pure, crystallized rage. This man, this absolute dumpster fire of a human being, had stolen my identity. He'd forged my signature, used my credit, taken out loans that I was legally responsible for, all while calling me a failure to his Facebook friends and letting his family destroy my belongings. We need to check your credit report, Logan said, already pulling out his phone. Right now? Because if he took out one loan, who knows what else is on there? He was right. We spent the next 20 minutes huddled around my laptop, pulling up my credit report from all 3 bureaus. And there they were, like landmines buried in my financial history. 2 credit cards I'd never opened. One from Chase with a balance of $3,200. Another from Capital One with $2,800. Both opened 3 years ago, right after Sabrina and I had bought our first house together. When Harold would have had easy access to all my personal information because I'd stupidly trusted him to help with the paperwork. The statements were all delivered to an address I didn't recognize. Minimum payments had been made sporadically, just enough to keep them from defaulting, but not enough to actually pay them down. My credit score had taken a hit. Not enough to ruin me, but enough to matter. Enough to affect interest rates on future loans. Enough to show up on background checks. Enough to prove that Harold had been systematically stealing from me for years. Logan was staring at the screen like he'd just witnessed a murder. $3,600 in interest and fees, he said, pointing at the numbers. That's what he's cost you in interest alone, not counting the actual balances. This man is a parasite. This man makes criminals look lazy, I said, echoing Logan's words from earlier. Except now it wasn't just a joke. It was literally true. Harold had committed identity theft, fraud, and probably about 15 other crimes that I'd need a lawyer to properly name. Aunt Lucille had been quiet through all of this, which was unusual for her. When I looked over, she was gripping the arms of her recliner so hard her knuckles had gone white. You're calling a lawyer, she said. It wasn't a question. You're calling a lawyer right now, and you're pressing charges, and you're making sure that man never works in finance again. She was right. She was absolutely right. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This wasn't just hurt feelings or destroyed property or mean Facebook posts. This was actual, prosecutable, go-to-jail crime. And I had the confession letter to prove it. I pulled out my phone and started searching for criminal defense attorneys. Or wait, I wasn't the one who needed defending. I needed a lawyer who specialized in identity theft and fraud. Someone who could look at Harold's letter and my credit report and see what I saw. A clear-cut case of financial abuse. I know a guy, Logan said, reading my mind. My buddy Jake's brother is a lawyer. Does a lot of white-collar crime stuff. He helped my uncle when his business partner embezzled money. I can call him right now if you want. Call him, I said, staring at Harold's letter spread out on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Because that's what it was now. Evidence. Harold had been so confident in his manipulation, so sure that I'd read his letter and feel sorry for him and let it all slide, that he'd literally confessed to multiple felonies in writing. The man didn't just insult me. He robbed me with a smile and called it protecting the family. He turned me into his personal credit mule, ran up thousands in debt, trashed my credit score, and then had the audacity to write me a letter acting like he was the victim of circumstances. Well, Harold, I thought, carefully folding the letter back up and placing it in the envelope. Let's see how victimized you feel when a prosecutor reads this. Logan was already on the phone, explaining the situation to his contact in rapid-fire sentences punctuated by increasingly creative curse words. Aunt Lucille had gotten up and started stress-baking again. I could hear her banging around in the kitchen, muttering things about jail and common decency and people like that. I sat there on the couch, holding Harold's confession letter, and smiled. Not because any of this was funny, but because for the first time since Thanksgiving, I wasn't just reacting. I was acting. And Harold Carter was about to learn that some jokes have punchlines that involve federal prosecutors. Logan's lawyer friend, a guy named Marcus Chun who looked way too young to be handling felony cases, but apparently had a conviction rate that made prosecutors nervous, told me it would take a few days to file the initial paperwork. Something about gathering evidence and building an airtight case and a bunch of other legal jargon that basically translated to Harold screwed, but Rome wasn't burned in a day. So I was sitting in Aunt Lucille's living room that Friday afternoon, eating leftover meatloaf and trying not to check my phone every 5 minutes, when Evelyn decided to make her grand reappearance in my life. The text came through around 3 o'clock, right when I was starting to think maybe the Carter family had finally gotten the hint that I wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. But no, that would have required self-awareness and basic pattern recognition, two things the Carters had in shorter supply than common sense. There's something in your old room you should see. That was it. No context, no explanation, no, hey, sorry, my husband committed multiple felonies against you. Just a cryptic message that sounded like the opening line of a horror movie where the protagonist does something stupid and ends up regretting it for the remaining 90 minutes. I stared at that text for a solid minute, my brain going through all the possible scenarios. This was obviously a trap. It had to be. Evelyn was probably sitting in that house right now with Sabrina and Harold, all of them gathered around like a villain committee, planning what fresh hell they could unleash if I was dumb enough to show up. Maybe they'd set up cameras to film me breaking in. Maybe they'd hidden something incriminating in the room and were planning to call the cops. Maybe they just wanted another chance to insult me to my face because the Facebook post wasn't satisfying enough. Absolutely not, Logan said when I showed him the message. He was sprawled in Lucille's recliner, his work boots leaving tiny dirt marks on the footrest that Lucille would definitely make him vacuum later. That's bait, man. That's the textbook definition of bait. They want you to come over so they can pull some kind of setup. He was right. Every rational part of my brain was screaming, don't do it. You idiot. It's a trap. Have you learned nothing from the past 2 weeks? But there was this other part, the part that had been married to this family for 6 years and unfortunately knew how they operated. That was curious. Because Evelyn didn't do vague. The woman could turn a simple grocery list into a 3-act play with commentary. If she was being mysterious, it meant she either wanted something or she'd found something she didn't know how to handle. I'm not going, I said firmly. But, Logan groaned. Oh no, I know that but. That's the but that leads to bad decisions and uncomfortable situations. But maybe you could go check it out? I finished, giving him my most convincing smile. Just a quick in and out. See what she's talking about. If it's nothing, we ignore it. If it's something, it's probably something terrible that will make you even angrier than you already are, Logan pointed out. But he was already standing up, grabbing his keys from the coffee table. Fine. But if they try to film me or set me up or do anything weird, I'm out. And you owe me, like, 50 beers for this. Deal, I said, watching him head for the door. And Logan, be careful. These people are clearly capable of anything. He left, and I spent the next 45 minutes pacing around Aunt Lucille's house like an expectant father in a sitcom. Lucille tried to distract me with stories about her bridge club drama. Apparently someone named Gladys had accused someone named Margaret of cheating, which had split the entire club into warring factions. But I couldn't focus. My mind was running through every possible scenario, each one worse than the last. When Logan finally called, I answered before the first ring finished. What did you find? Dude. His voice had that quality again. That mix of disbelief and fury that I was getting way too familiar with. You need to sit down for this. I was already sitting, but I gripped the arm of the couch anyway. Just tell me. I found a shoebox. Under the bed in your old room. Pushed way back in the corner like someone was trying to hide it. Evelyn wasn't there. She left it on the porch and took off before I showed up, which is suspicious as hell, but the box was right where she said it would be. What's in it? I asked, my stomach already sinking. Letters. Old receipts. Some pictures from when you were a kid. And a bank book. He paused. From First National. In your name. Dated from when you were 18. My heart stopped. Actually stopped for a second before remembering it had a job to do and reluctantly starting up again. A bank book? I never opened an account at First National. Yeah, you did. Well, someone did. Your grandmother did, actually. There's a letter in here from her. I'm reading it now. I heard papers rustling. It says, okay, here it is. My dearest grandson, I've opened this account for your future. $4,000 to help you start your life when you're ready. Use it wisely. Use it well. And know that your grandmother loves you more than all the stars in the sky. I couldn't breathe. My grandmother. My dad's mom. The woman who used to make me chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday morning and who died when I was 23, right before I met Sabrina. She'd opened an account for me. For $1,000, which in the early 2000s was serious money for a woman living on a teacher's pension. Money she'd saved, probably penny by penny, because she wanted to make sure I had something to build my future on. The balance, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. What's the current balance? Logan was quiet for a long moment. Too long. 0, he finally said. It was drained. Multiple withdrawals starting. He paused again, and I could practically hear him checking dates. 2 weeks after your wedding. The last withdrawal was about 3 years ago, cleaned out the remaining balance of $87. The room tilted. Actually physically tilted, or maybe that was just my entire worldview shifting on its axis. Harold hadn't just stolen from me. He hadn't just taken out credit cards or loans. He'd stolen from my dead grandmother. He'd taken money that she'd saved for me, money that represented years of her love and sacrifice and hope for my future, and he drained it like it was his own personal piggy bank. Are you still there? Logan asked. Man, say something. You're freaking me out. I'm here, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. That eerie, dangerous calm that comes right before a storm. What else is in the box? Receipts. Looks like Harold used the money for. Jesus, a fishing boat? There's a receipt here for a down payment on a fishing boat. And some golf club membership. And, he trailed off. There's a receipt from a jewelry store. $3,000 for a bracelet. Dated 6 months after your wedding. My hands were shaking now, but not from sadness. From pure, white-hot rage. Harold had taken my grandmother's gift, money she'd saved from her meager teacher's salary, money she'd set aside with a handwritten note about love and stars, and he'd spent it on toys for himself. A fishing boat he'd probably used twice. A golf membership at some pretentious country club where he could bore other middle-aged men with stories about his son-in-law, the failure. And a bracelet. Probably for Evelyn. Probably for some anniversary or birthday. Bought with stolen money and presented like he was some kind of generous husband. Bring me everything, I said, my voice steady and cold. Every letter, every receipt, every piece of paper in that box. And Logan? Yeah. Thank Evelyn for me. Tell her she just handed me enough evidence to bury Harold so deep he'll need a mining crew to find daylight. Logan laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You know this is going to get ugly, right? Like, nuclear-level ugly. The kind of ugly that ends up on the news. Good, I said. Let it get ugly. Let it get so ugly that people tell stories about it to scare their kids into being decent human beings. Harold wanted to teach me a lesson in humility? Fine. I'm about to teach him a lesson in consequences. Logan showed up 30 minutes later with the shoebox, and we spent the rest of the evening documenting everything. I took photos of every receipt, every letter, the bank book with its tragic decline from $4,000 to 0. My grandmother's handwriting, shaky but careful, full of love and hope, stared up at me from that letter, and I had to put it down twice because my vision got blurry and I wasn't crying. I was just processing. Aunt Lucille sat with me while I read through everything, her hand on my shoulder, not saying anything, because what was there to say? Harold had stolen from a dead woman. He'd taken money meant to help me build a life and used it to fund his own hobbies and luxuries. And he'd done it all while calling me a failure, while letting his family mock me and use me and treat me like I was less than human. Your grandmother would be proud of you, Lucille finally said, squeezing my shoulder. For standing up to him. For not letting them get away with it. I looked at that bank book, at the zeros where my future should have been, and I made a decision. Harold hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen something that couldn't be quantified in dollars. My grandmother's final act of love, her last gift to me. And for that, there would be no forgiveness, no mercy, no family reconciliation. Marcus Chun, when I called him and told him about the shoebox, actually whistled. You've got him, he said simply. Between the confession letter and this banking evidence, you've got him dead to rights. Identity theft, fraud, elder abuse if your grandmother was alive when he got the account information. She was, I said. She died 3 months after my wedding. He probably got all my personal information from the wedding paperwork. Even better. Well, not better for you, but better for the case. This is prosecutable 6 ways from Sunday. I hung up and looked at Logan and Lucille, who were both watching me like I was about to announce the end of the world. Maybe I was. The world the Carter family knew, anyway. The one where they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. Where family meant having an endless supply of people to use and abuse. That world was about to end. And I was going to be the one holding the match. Marcus Chin's office was located in one of those renovated downtown buildings that used to be a warehouse or a factory or something equally industrial before someone with too much money and a vision decided it needed exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place where you half expected to see a startup founder walking around with a laptop and a kombucha talking about disrupting the sandwich industry. But instead of tech bros, the building housed law offices, accounting firms, and a coffee shop on the first floor that charged $9 for a latte and called it artisanal. I showed up on Monday morning carrying a folder that was basically my life's worst hits compilation. Harold's confession letter, the credit reports showing the fraudulent accounts, bank statements, receipts from the shoebox, and my grandmother's letter that I'd carefully placed in a plastic sleeve because I couldn't handle the idea of anything happening to it. Logan had offered to come with me for moral support, but I told him he'd done enough. The man had already spent more time dealing with my in-laws' criminal activity than any reasonable person should have to, and he had actual paying jobs to get to. Marcus met me in the lobby, and I immediately understood why Logan had recommended him. The guy looked like he was maybe 30, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car payment, and had this energy about him like he'd already won the case before it even started. He shook my hand with the grip of someone who lifted weights for fun and led me up to his office on the 3rd floor. Coffee, he offered, gesturing to a fancy machine in the corner that looked like it required a PhD to operate. Fair warning, it's basically rocket fuel. My paralegal says I'm single-handedly keeping the local cardiologist in business. I'll take my chances, I said, because at this point, a heart attack seemed like a minor inconvenience compared to everything else I was dealing with. He made us both coffee, which was, as advertised, strong enough to wake the dead, and we settled into the chairs around his desk. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a successful young lawyer. Diplomas on the wall, law books that probably cost more than my college textbooks, a photo of him shaking hands with someone important at some event, and absolutely zero personal touches that might make him seem human. It was an office designed to say, I will destroy your enemies and bill you appropriately for it. I laid out everything on his desk like I was presenting evidence at a trial, which I guess I kind of was. Marcus picked up each document carefully, his expression shifting from professional interest to genuine shock as he read through Harold's confession letter. He actually wrote this down, Marcus said, not quite a question, more like he was confirming that reality was as stupid as it appeared. He confessed to identity theft and fraud in a letter. On paper, with his handwriting. Apparently, Harold's understanding of self-preservation is about as developed as his understanding of basic human decency. I said, taking a sip of coffee that immediately made my teeth hurt. Which is to say, non-existent. Marcus actually laughed at that, a short bark of amusement before he caught himself and returned to professional mode. He spent the next 20 minutes going through every document, occasionally making notes on a legal pad, asking questions about dates and amounts and timelines. When he got to my grandmother's letter and the bank statements showing the account being drained, his jaw actually clenched. "This is elder financial abuse," he said quietly. "Your grandmother was still alive when he accessed this account. She died 3 months after my wedding. Harold had access to all my personal documents because we were doing the marriage paperwork, buying a house, all that stuff. I trusted him." I laughed bitterly. What an idiot I was. You weren't an idiot. You were a person with normal human expectations of decency being exploited by someone without any. Marcus set down the bank book and looked at me directly. "Here's what I need you to understand. What he did isn't just morally wrong. It's criminal. Multiple felonies. We're looking at identity theft, wire fraud, credit card fraud, possibly elder abuse depending on when he obtained the account information. He's facing serious prison time if we prosecute this fully." "Good," I said, and I meant it. No hesitation, no guilt, just pure conviction. I want to press charges. All of them. I want him to face every possible consequence for what he's done. Marcus studied me for a moment, probably trying to gauge if I was going to change my mind once the reality set in. But he must have seen something in my expression, that same cold determination that had been building since Thanksgiving, because he nodded. "Okay then, let's bury him." We spent another hour going over strategy, timelines, what to expect from the process. Marcus explained that he'd need to coordinate with the DA's office, that there would be investigations and interviews, and probably a lot of waiting while the wheels of justice turned at their famously glacial pace. But he seemed confident, almost eager, in that way that lawyers get when they have a case that's so clear-cut it's basically a slam dunk. I left his office around noon feeling lighter than I had in weeks, despite the fact that I'd just set in motion a legal process that would probably dominate my life for the next several months. But it felt right. It felt like I was finally doing something instead of just reacting, finally taking control instead of being swept along by the Carter family's chaos. I was walking to my car, mentally planning to stop by Aunt Lucille's and report on the meeting, when my phone buzzed. Another unknown number, which immediately put me on edge because the last time I'd answered an unknown number it had been Harold's work phone asking to talk. But when I answered, it wasn't Harold. It was Evelyn, and she was crying. Not the theatrical, attention-seeking crying from the phone call last week. This was real crying. The kind that makes people's voices go all thick and broken. The kind you can't fake even if you're an excellent actress, which Evelyn definitely wasn't. "I need to see you," she said between sobs. "Please. I'm leaving him. I'm leaving Harold. You were right about everything, and I'm so sorry, and I have something you need to see." Every instinct I had was screaming, "Trap, trap, it's obviously a trap, hang up now." But there was something in her voice, something desperate and genuine that made me pause. Also, I was curious. Sue me. After everything that had happened, I wanted to know what could possibly make Evelyn Carter, the woman who defended her husband through fraud and theft and public humiliation, finally decide to leave. "Where are you?" I asked cautiously. "Outside your aunt's house. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to knock on the door. I brought some of your things. And something else. Something I found in Harold's desk that you need to see." I could have told her to leave it on the porch and drive away. I could have hung up and called the cops to report a suspicious person lurking outside Lucille's house. But that curiosity, that damned curiosity that had gotten me into trouble my entire life, won out. "Stay there. I'm 10 minutes away." I drove back to Aunt Lucille's, probably breaking several traffic laws, that coffee from Marcus's office making my heart race, or maybe that was just adrenaline. When I pulled up, there was Evelyn's Mercedes parked across the street, and she was sitting in the driver's seat looking like she'd aged about 10 years in the past 2 weeks. Her makeup was smudged, her hair wasn't styled in its usual perfect waves, and she was wearing a sweatshirt. Evelyn Carter, who I'd never seen in anything more casual than business casual, was wearing a sweatshirt. She got out when she saw me, carrying a reusable grocery bag, the fancy kind from Whole Foods that cost $5 and made people feel good about themselves, and her eyes were red and puffy from crying. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice small in a way I'd never heard it before. Evelyn was usually all bold statements and loud opinions, but right now she sounded defeated. I didn't say anything, just gestured for her to follow me inside. Aunt Lucille was in the kitchen making what smelled like lemon pie, and when she saw Evelyn, her expression could have frozen lava. "That woman is not welcome in my house." Lucille said firmly. It's okay, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure it was. She says she's leaving Harold. She has something I need to see. Lucille humphed, but didn't physically throw Evelyn out, which I took as permission to continue. We sat in the living room, me on the couch, Evelyn perched nervously on the edge of the chair like she might need to make a quick escape. She reached into the grocery bag and pulled out some of my stuff. A few books, some old CDs, my college diploma that I'd forgotten was even there. And then she pulled out a journal. My journal. The one I'd kept during the first year of my marriage. Back when I still thought writing down my feelings might help me process the slow realization that I'd married into a family of narcissists. I found this in the garage, Evelyn said quietly. And I read it. I know I shouldn't have, but I did, and she started crying again. You wrote about how alone you felt. How Harold made you feel worthless. How you'd catch me and Sabrina making fun of you when you left the room. Everything you wrote. It was all true, and we all just pretended it wasn't happening. I took the journal from her hands, feeling weird about someone reading my private thoughts, but also feeling vindicated in a strange way. Harold lied to all of us. Evelyn continued. He told me you were fine with lending him money. He said you'd given permission for those credit cards. He said the Facebook post was something you'd laughed about, but it was all lies. She looked up at me with eyes full of tears and what might have been genuine remorse. He even borrowed money from my relatives using your name. Told my brother you needed a loan for a business investment. My brother gave him $15,000 thinking he was helping you. $15,000. On top of everything else. The number just kept growing. I'm leaving him, Evelyn said again. I filed for separation this morning. I wanted you to know that, and I wanted to give you this journal back, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. I looked at her. This woman who'd called me selfish, who'd tried to withdraw money from my account, who'd defended her husband through everything, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no sympathy, just exhaustion. You made your bed, I said, repeating the same words she'd once told me when I'd complained about Harold's behavior. Good luck lying in it. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel bad. I stood up, gestured toward the door, and watched her leave with her empty grocery bag and her regrets. Aunt Lucille appeared from the kitchen with a slice of lemon pie. You handled that well, she said, handing me the plate. Did I? Better than she deserved. Lucille sat down next to me. You gave her the same grace. She gave you, which is to say, none at all. I ate my pie and read through my old journal, remembering the man who'd written those entries. The guy who genuinely believed love could fix everything, who'd thought if he just tried harder, was more patient, more understanding, that eventually the Carter family would accept him. That guy was gone. And honestly, good riddance. You know that feeling when you watch a Jenga tower finally collapse after someone's been pulling pieces out recklessly for an hour? That satisfying moment when physics and consequences finally catch up with hubris and stupidity? That's exactly what watching the Carter family implode felt like, except instead of wooden blocks, it was their entire lives crashing down, and instead of feeling bad about it, I was sitting front row with popcorn. It started the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my meeting with Marcus Chen. I was at Aunt Lucille's house working remotely. My boss had been incredibly understanding about the whole my in-laws committed multiple felonies against me situation and had let me work from home indefinitely. When Logan called with news that was so good I almost didn't believe it. Harold's been fired, he said without preamble, and I could hear the grin in his voice even through the phone. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. What? When? How do you know? My buddy Dave works in the same building. He said security escorted Harold out this morning with a box of his stuff. Apparently, the company launched an internal investigation after your lawyer contacted them about the fraud, and they found some other inconsistencies in Harold's expense reports. Dude's been padding his business expenses for years. Of course he had. Because why commit one type of fraud when you could commit multiple types and really go for the gold? Harold had apparently been billing personal expenses to the company. Fancy dinners with Evelyn that he claimed were client meetings, golf trips that were definitely not business-related. Even that fishing boat purchase had somehow been partially expensed as team-building equipment. The man had turned fraud into a lifestyle brand. They're not just firing him, Logan continued. They're pursuing their own charges. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, the whole 9 yards. Richard Morrison apparently told the board that Harold had compromised the integrity of the organization, which is corporate speak for, "This guy's a criminal and we want nothing to do with him." I leaned back in my chair and smiled at the ceiling. Harold had spent years obsessing over his reputation at that firm, networking and schmoozing and playing golf with people he probably hated, all to climb that corporate ladder. And now he'd been thrown off it so hard, he'd probably left a crater. The same man who'd called me a failure on Facebook was now unemployed, under investigation, and probably unhireable in his industry. Karma didn't just come knocking. It kicked down the door and brought receipts. But wait, as they say in those late-night infomercials, there's more. 2 days later, Tiffany, Sabrina's sister, the self-proclaimed influencer who'd mocked me with my Superman socks, discovered that actions have consequences in the form of credit card applications. She'd apparently tried to open a new card at some luxury department store so she could finance more ring lights and whatever else influencers buy to maintain the illusion of success, and got denied. Not just denied, but flagged. Logan heard about this through the family grapevine. Apparently Tiffany had called their cousin Jessica in hysterics, and Jessica had called her mom, who'd called Logan's mom, who'd called Logan, because that's how family gossip works. It's like a game of telephone, except everyone's actually trying to get the message right because the drama is too good to misquote. Turns out that when the fraud investigation started, the credit bureaus had flagged the entire Carter family network as high risk. Harold's fraudulent activities had created this web of financial red flags, and anyone associated with him was now under scrutiny. Tiffany, who'd been living off Harold's money and his ill-gotten gains for years, was suddenly discovering what it felt like to be treated like a credit risk. Her application hadn't just been denied. It had been flagged for potential fraud association, which meant she'd be explaining her family's criminal activity to creditors for years. She's claiming it's unfair. Logan told me over beers at Lucille's kitchen table. Says she didn't do anything wrong and shouldn't be punished for her dad's mistakes. Interesting, I said, taking a sip. So when she destroyed my stuff and mocked me, that was hilarious. But when she faces consequences for being part of a family that committed fraud, suddenly fairness matters. Exactly. Logan clinked his bottle against mine. Welcome to consequences, Tiffany. Population you. And then there was Sabrina, my soon-to-be ex-wife, the woman who'd laughed when her father called me a failure, who'd sat there drinking champagne and posting about people who can't take a joke, while her family systematically destroyed everything I owned. She'd gone completely dark on social media. No Instagram stories about how blessed she was. No Facebook posts about living her best life. No TikTok videos with whatever song was trending that week. Her accounts were still up. I checked, because I'm petty and I wanted to see, but they'd been radio silent for over a week. The woman who documented every meal and every outfit and every thought that passed through her head had suddenly discovered the value of privacy right around the time her father got arrested. Because yes, Harold had been arrested. Marcus had called me Wednesday afternoon with that particular piece of good news. The DA had moved faster than expected, probably because the case was so clear-cut a law school dropout could have prosecuted it. Harold had been charged with identity theft, wire fraud, credit card fraud, and embezzlement from his former employer. He'd been released on bail. Apparently Evelyn had posted it using money from her own family, which had to sting, but the damage was done. His mugshot was public record. His name was in the local news. The man who'd been so concerned about his reputation had become the cautionary tale people would tell at dinner parties about why you should run background checks on your in-laws. I spent that entire week gathering documents like I was preparing for the trial of the century, even though Marcus said we probably wouldn't even need to go to trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession letter alone was damning enough, but I wanted everything organized, categorized, and ready. Call it petty, call it excessive, call it whatever you want. I called it insurance. I created a folder on my laptop titled, "You Don't Own Me Anymore," which I thought was appropriately dramatic and also accurate. Inside went digital copies of everything. Harold's confession letter, the credit reports showing the fraudulent accounts, bank statements from my grandmother's drained account, receipts from the shoebox, screenshots of the Facebook post, photos of my destroyed man cave, text messages from the Carter family making demands and threats, Evelyn's confession about Harold's lies, everything. It was a greatest hits album of their terrible behavior, and every track was a banger. But the digital copy wasn't enough. I wanted them to see it, to hold it in their hands and realize exactly how much evidence I had against them. So I printed everything out. Used up 3 ink cartridges at Lucille's house, printing page after page of their crimes and cruelty. Organized it all with tabs and labels like I was preparing a presentation for a Fortune 500 company. Put it in a manila envelope that was so stuffed it barely closed. "You're really doing this," Aunt Lucille said, watching me seal the envelope. It wasn't a question. "I'm really doing this," I confirmed. "Good," she said firmly. "They need to see what they've done. All of it. Laid out where they can't deny it or minimize it or call it a joke." That Saturday afternoon, I drove to the house I'd once called home. The place where I'd cooked Thanksgiving dinner and folded napkins and tried so hard to be accepted by people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient target. Logan had offered to come with me for backup, but I wanted to do this alone. This was my closure, my final act in the Carter family drama, and I needed to do it myself. The house looked the same as always. Perfectly manicured lawn that Harold paid someone else to maintain. Expensive cars in the driveway that were probably being repossessed as I sat there. That ridiculous lawn gnome that Evelyn thought was whimsical, but actually looked like it was judging everyone who walked past it. I sat in my car for a moment, engine running, looking at this house that had never really been my home, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no nostalgia. Just indifference. I got out, walked up to the mailbox at the end of the driveway, and dropped in the envelope. It landed with a satisfying thud, and I stood there for a second imagining Harold opening it, seeing page after page of his documented crimes, realizing that I hadn't just walked away from this family. I'd built a case against them. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and pulled up my music library. Scrolled until I found the perfect song. Queen's "Another One Bites the Dust" started playing through my speakers, and I turned it up. Loud. So loud that I'm sure if anyone was home, they could hear it through the walls. And then I drove away. No looking back. No second thoughts. No dramatic confrontation. Just me, driving away from that house for the last time, with Freddie Mercury singing about dust, and I was grinning like an absolute lunatic because it was perfect. The whole thing was absolutely perfect. The Carter family empire hadn't just crumbled. It had been systematically demolished, brick by brick, consequence by consequence. And the best part? They'd done most of the work themselves. I'd just provided the documentation. Months passed. My savings grew. I landed a new job managing logistics at a small firm run by people who didn't film their employees folding napkins. Revolutionary concept, I know. Then one random Tuesday, Ben texted, "Dad's drinking. Mom left. Sis disappeared. Guess you were right." I stared at that message for exactly 3 seconds before typing back. I usually am. Then I blocked him. Felt good. Felt really good, actually. Aunt Lucille and Logan insisted I stay until I was ready to move out, which turned into 4 months of the best homemade cooking and unconditional support a guy could ask for. Eventually, I got my own apartment by the river, quiet, sunny, with a kitchen where nobody filmed me working or stole my grandmother's money. Every morning now, I make coffee in my own place, sit by the window watching the water, and whisper Harold's words back to myself. Look at this failure. He was always a servant. Then I laugh. Because yeah, I was a servant, to people who didn't deserve it. But the servant retired, built his own kingdom, and left the Carters exactly where they belonged, in the dust.